Hello, everybody, and happy Sunday wherever you are. We have a lot to talk about. First of all, we have to talk about and dissect the last episode I did, which I'm quite happy with all the information that came out of that about what actually happened before World War One, what made it all possible, and we all talk about the gold, and I think I put a little note in there as to why I don't think there is a gold train as such. There's also two contradictions in that episode, and I hope you all watched it because we're going to be talking about this episode that we just did, and it's an important episode historically because, as I heard Joseph and myself and many others, far smarter people than I, talk about the events of World War II and the bankers, the finances, the CIA, the Dulles, the International Bank of Settlements, and all of that. I tried to tie together in that one episode to give everybody a little bit of a leg up, especially those who don't have the time to read all the millions of books and papers and stuff that we sometimes do. And I talked to Joseph as well, and he thought it was a good idea. I asked him to join me today, but he probably can't. So we're going to dissect that a little bit. Like I said, there's two contradictions in that episode that I want to go over because I know when I contradict myself, but that was the information I got. And when I read it and I pass it on to you, we have to dissect it together and figure it out. Before we do anything else and talk about all of that, I have one announcement to make. And later on, Robert and Radio Show will join me and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I saw a lot of you guys have been asking about where Crystal is and why she's not here. And I have some bad news on that. Some last week, Crystal had won the first out of 3 strokes in a row. And 2 days ago, she passed away. So she is no longer with us. And I spoke with her husband yesterday, and we're in contact with the family. She had health issues, not something that should have led to a stroke necessarily, but it happened fast. And when she was in the hospital, she was pretty much unconscious the time until she went to the ICU. And so she didn't, in that sense, suffer. And it was quick. And obviously, her husband and her daughter are taking that great to heart. And our love and our prayers go out to them all the way. And like I said, we are in contact, and she will be missed. She was like the mother hen of all of us, and that is it's not right. She was only 59. As many of you may know, that Crystal was one of our very early supporters and helpers here on Lost Battlefields, and yeah, she was one that came together with all of us because of history, and because of her love of history. And she worked in the army once it was in a service in the missile department, and I still have over 80 emails of research and papers from hers that we'll get to. But anyway, that we'll talk about that more. Now we have to have a talk about how we can sort of keep ourselves alive for the next foreseeable future. Did you get your The Truth Is Down There, Hans Kammerlamuk? That was shameless. Yes, there will be a Crystal Memorial shirt on the Lost Battlefield site, and all the sales of that will go to the family. By the way, anyway, and it will involve the term, her term for spooters. That will be kept alive. I guess I'll never look at a spider the same way again. Anyway, before all the guys join us, yes, you do want a Hans Kammler coffee mug. I had an idea, and I have not. Yes, I'm sitting in a boring cubicle, so I have a virtual background. There's a couple of them we're gonna have to make, and I'll see what his family think of on that one. Uh, yes, and she was a smartass, and we need more smartasses. I said that with a little bit of trepidation. And hello, Liverpool. Hello, Liverpool. So I just got a mail that I had to go to Liverpool. There was an underground command center or something under there. Anyway, we'll talk more about all of that towards the end. But and I will pass on all your condolences and all your notes to her late husband, of course, and I will go see them when I come out in the south again. But anyway, he's eating those squirrels. Don't get me started on the squirrels. One thing, one thing that I always get, and I just got from a close friend of mine, is the eternal question of when we look at the world today, what are we going to do? Because everybody is starting to feel helpless, and we see history repeating itself, being fast forwarded. And what we can do here is we can start dissecting how this all happened. And when you look at the creation of the CIA and that's not being the only strange, sinister agency that we should be worried about, but when you see the undercurrents of the dark intelligence networks that sprung up from after World War II and who ran it and how, we can always go backwards and dissect our way forward into how that is all paralleled and to some degrees overtaken today. And my pet peeve in life, okay, I have quite a few of them, squirrels being one. The Nuremberg trials is another. The Nuremberg trials really frustrate the living crap out of me because of all the ramifications the judgments have left behind historically. Like I said, the Nuremberg trials are trials that have caused laws to be written and passed based on them. And the Nuremberg trials were, even according to Justice Jackson himself, deeply flawed and had little to do with resemblance of law. And what that has caused is, for World War II, it has left a void of understanding. Because one of the main problems with the Nuremberg trials, as we came out of World War II, thinking, as us the Americans, the British, the French, and I'll have to stick the Russians in there, but well, they you can't say the Russians didn't win the war, because they certainly did. But when we come out, especially as the Americans and the British, taking a moral high ground, saying we were so much better than the evil Nazis, and you then see how they ran this trial, how they literally set up the trial, and it was a show trial, and that's why you also see what happened to bankers and industrialists after the war. The same people that started or made the war possible, in a sense, were let off by during the Nuremberg trials, while some of the people, like Keitel, the Americans didn't, or the British didn't want to hang Keitel. The Russians and the French did, so, and then the British, and we did, the Americans did, so we did. But there wasn't much war crimes against him. And when we go over the actual evidence, well, the evidence at the Nuremberg trials poses an enormous problem, especially for the defense counsels, because the prosecution, predominantly the American prosecution, actively burned and destroyed any documents that could have been of use to defense counsel. And there was a sense of horse trading. And I know Joseph, he always laughs at whenever we talk about Hjalmar Schacht, the former head of the Reichsbank, and the one of the members of the board of Bank of International Settlements. Now remember, if it hadn't been for the Bank of International Settlements set up in 1930, in order to facilitate war crimes or war reparations uh, by the Germans. If it hadn't been for them, it would have been very hard for Germany to have conducted business with outsiders, outside countries during the war. American businesses, Dutch, British businesses did business and transactions. Mostly, of course, the Germans did transactions with the neutral countries during the war through the Bank of International Settlements, and to about a 50-50 extent with other Swiss banks. And if it hadn't been, and I understand the Swish, that's what Swish, yeah, can't talk today, sorry, it's a dentist week. If it wasn't for the Swiss and their banking system, it would have been very, very hard for the Germans to have conducted business and have bought all the raw materials from outside the country's borders or outside the Reich borders during the war. That's why I never buy into the Swiss story. Well, they felt compelled to have to deal with the Germans because, well, at least until 1943, the Italians were on one side and the Germans were on the other, and they were all surrounded. And what were they going to do? And the Germans were going to invade. And I know Walter Schellenberg, head of foreign intelligence, counter-espionage for Germany, always said that, well, he stopped Hitler from invading Switzerland. And I know somehow, having read Schellenberg's book, I would like to like Schellenberg because he was not sentenced to any war crimes. He had apparently some hand in the killing of some Russian prisoners. And I'm thinking, well, considering how many prisoners were shot by everybody, putting a guy to jail for shooting a handful or being part of, not having done it himself, but being some way involved, that almost seems comical. But he was let out early, and he wrote his book, and he died of cancer in 1951. So he didn't live much longer afterwards anyway. But his book is a little bit self-serving, and when he writes about how he saved the Swiss from Hitler's invasion, I think that is one of those self-serving stories that he made up, because I really don't think there was ever any thought on the Germans' mind of invading Switzerland, because they couldn't afford to. The Swiss kept them afloat, literally laundering money in and out. And 2/3 of Swiss production or sales, trade, went to Germany throughout the entire war. Germany was the biggest trading partner during the war with Switzerland. They couldn't afford not to. They depended on each other. Of course, after the war, everybody stopped being supportive of the National Socialist cause. Everybody was against it. Nobody wanted to trade with them. Everybody was forced to. And you had no shortage of excuses why everybody did what they did to keep their head out of the noose. And I sort of get that. Hjalmar Schacht was to some degree one of them. Justice Jackson said that one of the worst of the war crimes figures on trial was Hjalmar Schacht, because he and his economics made it possible for Germany to rearm. Now, Jackson was not, I don't think Justice Jackson was a bad man. He came to a bit of a sad end involving a prostitute in a hotel in Washington or New York. I forget, that doesn't really matter. But I don't think he was a bad man. I think he was a very idealistic man who really genuinely tried to put the idea of aggressive war on trial itself. He wanted to try the organizations more so than having people representing the organizations that started the war. Of course, that became a problem, considering the Russians themselves were guilty of all of this. The British, to some degree, had certainly made plans, and the reason why they were in Norway basically on the same time the Germans were, because they were going to invade Germany and neutral Sweden for their iron ore. So everybody was guilty of everything to some more or less extent, which is why the rules the War Crimes Tribunal used to punish these people after the fact was made up by, well, what ended up primarily being the judges before Also, the selection of who was to be tried. Like I said, the British really didn't want Schacht to be hung. And Jackson absolutely wouldn't let him go, so he ended up in the dock. But of course, Hjalmar Schacht was acquitted. Then he was arrested by the Germans, who also acquitted him, and he ended up with a decent career. And in Schacht's defense, well, every industrialist and every company, including America, did brisk business with Germany that helped rebuild the war industry. If it hadn't been for the industrialists investing in Germany and German industry, Germany also wouldn't have been able to rearm. So you can't really pin that on Schacht. I know that was a bit idealistic on Jackson's behalf, but you really can't. And there's another story to why Schacht was let off, which is going to make, I'm sure there's somebody who will raise a few eyebrows on that one. Schacht was an old friend of Sir Norman, the head of the Bank of England, and the British judge at Nuremberg, and the lawyer at Nuremberg there for his. And the interesting thing is the British had made strong representations to Jackson, to the courts, to let Schacht off at least easy. And one combining factor that, besides the fact that Sir Norman and Schacht, they were old friends, and Sir Norman was godfather of one of Schacht's children, between him and the British judge, and I forget the British judge name at Nuremberg right now, I'm sorry, doesn't matter. But there was one thing that combined all these four men as well, is that they were all Freemasons. And now I don't believe that there's a Masonic conspiracy to take over the world. I never really have believed that, predominantly because I know a lot of Masons, and I don't see most of them, any of them, capable or willing or interested in taking over the world, by far. And there's a book. I have not read that book. I will pick that up. Thank you for that note. Somebody reminded me of that one. So anyway, that is Schacht. And also Schacht, he had a falling out with Hitler and had left the Bank of, he was no longer the head of the Reichsbank from 1939. And he was arrested in 1944, which is why I really wanted Joseph here, because when you look at, Joseph always had an interesting theory that a lot of the people after the July 20th plot were being being prosecuted or they were being prosecuted by the Gestapo, by the Germans. They were being sort of sheep-dipped because that would exonerate them after the war. And by July 20th, 1944, everybody sort of knew that the war eventually would end not in Germany's favor. And by that time, Bormann and the industrialists, they already knew, including Bormann and Himmler, that the war was going to come to an end, and they were going to start stacking up assets outside of Germany through all the shell companies, cutouts, Swiss banks, in all of the different companies moving assets to different countries. So they knew there was going to be a reckoning after the war. That was inevitable, and certainly there was. What Joseph's theory always was, that a lot of these people that were either officially killed or at least imprisoned, like Schacht, because of involvement in the July 20th plot, could then go after the war and say, well, we were imprisoned, we were against the regime, and then go back to running the businesses that was really in charge. And I think that is a key thing, is who was really in charge of where this was going. My question was always, all these industrialists and bankers and money people that funded and supported Hitler, were they the driving forces? Obviously, they supported Hitler because Hitler was going to stand between the West and the Russians and try to get after the communists, obviously. Did they think he was going to be stuck in Germany, just keeping Western Europe safe by having a strong military and a strong border to the east? Or did they know he was going to start a war towards the east? They must at least have had an inkling, considering, even though Hitler didn't write most of Mein Kampf, well, he stood behind it, and it was in the damn book. He always stated that he wanted living room to the east, and it was very confusing to a lot of them when he did the Ribbentrop-Molotov Act, or Pact, which is another interesting thing that brings us back to Nuremberg, that the Russians and the Germans signed a non-aggression pact so they could both invade Poland. And they did. And when we then fast forward to Nuremberg, well, this was a problem for the Russians, because one of the points they were going to try to put the Germans on trial for was waging an aggressive war, which the Russians also did, not to mention against Finland. So the Russians outright denied this happened. They simply denied that there was any, they ever signed that. It was all falsehood. And when that was up in the Nuremberg trials, there was, like I said, the prosecution team outright destroyed tons of papers that could have been of defense to the defense, or could have been used to the defense. They burnt them, they destroyed them, they wouldn't let them have them, they hid them in the archives. The Americans kept hiding defense witnesses, saying they didn't know where they were, which was absolutely true, like with Karl Wolff. I'll tell you about that story in a minute. When it came to the Nuremberg papers, an American who actually wanted to try to do the right thing, remember there was close to 1,000 people in Nuremberg being put up by the U.S. Army to some $4 million worth of what the trial cost. And one of them actually took a photo scan of the Nuremberg, of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, and handed it secretly to the defense team, who then presented it in court, much to the consternation of the Russians, who denied it, at which case there was one of Ribbentrop's undersecretary stood up in court. He wasn't on trial. He was there. He stood up in court and said, no, this document is absolutely correct. I was there when it was being signed and my signature is on the paper. And when then asked if he would, by the German Defense Council, if he would later, after that day, but he admitted it, stood up in court, great consternation. Afterwards, the German Defense Council asked if he would do that, as state that as a affidavit of truth, that this was correct. And then this poor diplomat had changed his mind, because there was one person, a German, former German lawyer, on that Jackson had been saddled with, named Miss Kempner, had gotten to him and threatened him that he would have been executed or handed over to the Russians immediately, or the Poles, if he did not recant. And that's how the game was played. One of the trials was how points were that how Jews were persecuted and evicted from their homes in Germany before the war. Well, for Jackson and his enormous legal staff, not that I'm saying he's responsible, that's just how it went. Nuremberg was, 85% bombed, completely destroyed out, people living in ruins and basements. Water wasn't drinkable because there were still dead bodies under the rubble. And there was a few buildings still standing that was inhabited by Germans. But the Jackson's defense team and the British and the French and the Russian defense team, they needed a place to stay. Plus, they also needed a place to stay for the reporters. So they evicted hundreds of Germans from their homes, literally gave them one day to kick them out with only what they could carry. That sounds familiar to the 1930s, doesn't it? Is that not? That's a complete and utter breach of the Geneva Convention. So, and that's how it went. Like I said, with General Wolff. The General Wolff was wanted in Goering's defense. And the Americans said they had no idea where he was. And they knew where he was. He was in a prison camp. And Stalin, another prison, where they had kept him. And after a German defense council finally found out where he was and pointed it out, they moved him to an insane asylum, where they kept him until 1947, where finally, was it Reda? I think it was Reda. It was, Milch trial. One of the air marshals trial. They finally got him called up to testify for him, and they found out where he was and presented up to the court. This was the Nuremberg trials. It was one of the subsequent smaller trials, and they had him pulled out of the insane asylum to testify And after he gave his testimony in court in 47, he asked the judges if they had all been satisfied that he had given good testimony and that he was sane. And of course, they had, as General Wolfe was an intelligent man. And whereafter he said, they all said they had, but after that, he said, well, good, because just wanted to make sure, because now the Americans are going to put me back in the insane asylum where they kept me out of communication for the last year and a half. And the judge there and then set him free. But that was the game that was played. And you can trace a lot of these shenanigans back to, well, what was Donovan and Dulles doing behind the scenes? Donovan thought he was going to present the main case. Donovan was he was the head of the OSS, eventually going to be the first head of the CIA. Donovan had offered Jackson a lot of help because, of course, Donovan, being Dulles' chief, had a lot of information, documentation, informants. But Dulles also had an agenda, and so did Donovan. So did Donovan as well. They both did. And eventually Jackson caught on and sent him home to Washington, where he was very, very upset and started raising a publicity campaign against Jackson on trying to undermine him. The Katyn Forest, you don't know what the Katyn Forest is. It is where the Russians murdered 30,000 Polish officers. And it's not a... well, you need to watch. You need to watch the episode probably first. Sorry, read the got confused there for a minute. So you already start seeing the undermining of a political effort by what was, you could say, that that's where the deep state started. And who were these people? Because they all the industrialists, all the businessmen, all the operators who put Germany in business and back online in the 30s, yes, they sacrificed quite a few during the war and after. And after that, everybody went back in business. And I mean, we see that obviously. We have the sorry, I was trying to keep up with the chat here for a second there. Knock it off. Anyway, you see everything continued. But a lot of people, just like what I said, a lot of people were sacrificed of the Germans that was compromised, like Himmler was, like Goering was. People that could no longer be useful to what came next. I mean, could you imagine Goering getting off on a fairly light sentence and for the founding of the EU, Goering being in the running for president of the EU? You know what? I could see that, at least if you stay off the drugs. But there's just some people who could see Himmler do it. I mean, it was Himmler's idea, the EU, so obviously he should probably have been the first in the running. But again, there was a outright argument between the Allies of how they were going to expedite and kill the Germans afterwards. And a lot of them were just killed or suicided. And certainly when you came to somebody like Himmler, certainly he was murdered because he knew way too much. And we all kind of want to know what it is he wrote to Churchill the end of the war. But when we came, for instance, to the Katyn massacre, where the Russian NKVD in late 1939, winter 1939, murdered 30,000 captured Polish. The Russians held mock trials after the war, and where they hanged several German officers for having committed the Katyn Forest massacre, well knowing that they had done it themselves. And of course, this have later been admitted The Russians have made it, that the NKVD did it. It's not. Movies have been made of it. It's not a secret anymore. But it is still in the Nuremberg trial laws that the Germans have been condemned for doing this, even though they obviously didn't. And this is where it matters. And in my ideal world, I would like to dig up all the information that's come up subsequently, scour all the archives for documentation, and then retry the Nuremberg trials. Like I said, I don't think most of the people, well, they're all dead now anyway, but most people were who had been hung or been after the Nuremberg trials had been sentenced, the judgment probably wouldn't be very different. Although certainly there was, like with Keitel, never had a death sentence, but the Russians wanted somebody hanged, and there was a horse trade-off between him and somebody else. I can't remember who the other one was that they wanted instead, who then was not hanged. Speer would probably receive the death penalty when it boils down to it, knowing his use of forced labor. But this is another thing where we look at the Germans the SS made quite a bit of money on selling the forced laborers, the prisoners that they had taken. They rented to industries as laborers. 4 Reichsmarks for those unskilled, 6 Reichsmarks for those who were skilled. And of course, many of them were worked to death, and they died of malnutrition and lack of food. And this is another piece of documentation that never made it. Like Sauckel, one who was the Reich Minister of Labor, I believe he oversaw, amongst others, the treatment of the labor force, and had stated clearly in documentations and in meetings where the Allies, where the Americans had the minutes, that they had to start increasing the food allowance for the prisoners. Himmler had also stated this numerous times, that they had to get them more food. The documents that stating that, they were withheld from the prosecution for the defense, and subsequently he was hanged. So you can't say that all of the judgments would have been the same. Some of them might not have been. It was like what Goering said. If you win the war, who's going to ask if you're lying? And lies have long legs. And if you're the first one out with a story, this is how propaganda works, how propaganda works today. And this is where we can begin to draw the parallels of what happened then to now. You see it in any political hit job. If you come out, we've all seen that, hell, I've seen that, people that try to do it to me. If you come out with a story, I'll just boil it down to, if you and me, we're standing on a street corner and there's a guy standing across the street, and I tell you this guy is a pedophile, he's a rapist, he hurts children, you will believe that. I can even elaborate, give you some stories about what this horrible person has done. Whenever you meet this person from now on, this is the lens through which you will see him. Even if it then comes out later that is not true at all, from that point on, you will still be impressed by the very first you heard about this person. That's why political hit jobs are so damn effective, because the first one who comes out with a story of propaganda about somebody else, loud and in all the newspapers, mass media, that are all tied together, so they can all come out with the same story at the same time. When they do that, then everybody hears that story. Like the laptop story. The laptop story was so effectively squelched, the Hunter Biden's laptop story, that nobody believed it. And it was utterly true. And if you really looked through, before the election, the 2020 election, if you looked through all the manure and all the media coverage, you would see a little story that, again, suppressed because we don't have an honest media, that said Hunter Biden's lawyers had reached out to the computer shop to get his laptop back. Well, that's pretty damning evidence that it's his laptop, that isn't it? So for everything else after that, it shouldn't have mattered. But because the onslaught, and the same thing for the Nuremberg trials, you came out with first impressions. Exactly. And with all these stories, and when you start showing on the first day of the Nuremberg trials, they were showing videos of the dead bodies in the camps that have been liberated. That footage was, by the way, edited by Hitchcock, of all people. Dead they certainly were, running into camps full of thousands of bodies. They certainly did. And at that point, it doesn't matter if they died of a recent bombing or starvation. They were in German camps and there was bodies piled up. You show that visual, it's really hard to defend anything after that point. Shock and awe. And that's also one of the reasons why the Americans in Nuremberg wanted to use human witnesses, because you have a better splash effect. If you start presenting the documents, which is what Jackson really wanted to do, is present a lot of documentation, and it's a little more dry because they have millions and millions of pages of paper, to the point where they only pulled just exactly what they could use. And again, the Defense Council, who since after the war was very, very bitter about this, was not allowed the full run of all the documentation, so they couldn't counter. The defense was only allowed the information they were given by the prosecutors. Can you imagine that today? Can you imagine you have all the defendants that were sitting in prisons? They were being starved. They were being neglected exercise. They weren't allowed communication with their loved ones. Goering's little daughter, 7 years old, and his wife were locked up in Stalin prison for a while. Why did the Americans lock up a 7-year-old girl? We want to talk about the Geneva Convention? I mean, it's just why? So put pressure on him when eventually he was told. But that's how there was a long stream of pressure, oppression, torture. Now, that is not to be hold your questions till I'm done ranting, because unless you're holding keeping track on questions, but I don't want to neglect the questions. But we all know I'm not a very intelligent person, so if I start reading questions at the same time as I'm talking, I'm just going to lose my track and I'm just going to start singing. So hold the intelligent questions until I'm done ranting here. See, now I already lost my track there. Okay, but so we're looking at these excesses by, especially my pet peeve is the treatment of especially of the women, of course, that were the horrible things that happened to German women. We always said, well, after the war, and we always said, well, the Russians mass raped German women in Berlin and elsewhere, and Czech women, Czechoslovakian women, although they were supposed to liberate them. And then you had French colonials, soldiers there was some horrible things they did in Stuttgart, I believe it was one of the places. But it wasn't just that; it was also female laborers, forced prisoners living in barracks, having been liberated by British, that were being raped by them because they had nowhere else to go. And you have the American soldiers coming over Normandy through France, and you have all these stories. War is a history of atrocities, and I'm not going to blame them whole scale. But if you look at the propaganda, the Russians had been told by their propagandists about how horrible Russian propaganda outright stated rape and kill wherever you go, verbatim. And American propaganda to British the same, to their soldiers, were not in that, certainly not that bad, but certainly there was no propaganda is very much not forgiving towards the enemy, towards the person you propagandize against. There's no, he's a horrible person, but, he's still a human being. There's no such thing. He's a horrible person, kill him. That was the verbatim back then. Let's just look at the carpet bombing of of German cities, which leads back to another problem with the Nuremberg trial laws. But we'll get to the laws in just a second. People do horrible things in wars, and I will, even with my degree in psychology, I will to some degree I will explain and understand the thoughts of a rapist. Why? Because to a study of psychology is you need to understand people's behaviors and explain them sometimes to the people who are actually doing the things that you're trying to dissect for them. And if you look at young men fighting a war, being killed, losing their friends, you become desensitized. There's more of a primal focus on the very basics. Stay alive and kill anything that's trying to kill you. And the only relief you would have is sex or alcohol as a soldier, whether it be a Russian or an American or British or French. Plus, if you then insert an outright hatred of the enemy, and there was a lot of hate, and the Germans were conquered and they were vanquished, and to some, and I've heard that from several German women that lived through the time, that it was almost expected tacitly by some Germans that, well, we lost the war, now we have to succumb all the way to those who beat us. It's a mindset that would be hard to understand today. But still, okay, you also have millions of soldiers. Some of them are bound to be bad people and criminals, or have sociopathic traits, just like any grouping of people. There'll be good people, there'll be bad people, there'll be crazy people among them. And when you whole scale recruit that many in the primitive situation of war, bad things happen. And I understand it. And we can sit here detached now, so many years after the war, and talk about how everybody committed war crimes and all these war crimes were terrible. But we can do it detached emotionally. In 1945, 1946, having just lost your friends and having the propaganda in your mind, have seen pictures of the camps, you're likely to blame everybody. Your emotions riding high on that moment. And vengeance is certainly one thing that people take. You look, one of the most atrocious things the U.S. Army did was when they liberated Dachau. They put up some 458 German soldiers and machine gunned them. They even filmed it, outright killed them, because they saw this. Dachau wasn't a so-called death camp. There was no gas chambers there. Although, according to the Nuremberg trials, there were, but there weren't, which has later been admitted and stated, investigated. But during the Nuremberg trials, you could throw all sorts of things in there, like human bodies made out of soap, which was also made up, which even the Premier of Israel 60 years ago said, yeah, that also wasn't true. The lampshade thing wasn't true. All these, there was all this nasty propaganda. And when you're in that time, you can't just look it up online and say, well, this doesn't make sense. You believe it. And they believed it. And they punished people. They wanted to kill these guys. And the guys they shot in Dachau were new recruits that had just been, because the guys who had been there for a long time, they all fled and stuck these young kids in there, and they were all killed. Is that fair? No. Is it understandable if you walk into a camp that you perceive is these 400 people have starved and murdered all these thousands of dead bodies? Becomes understandable, yes. Is it a war crime? Yes. The Geneva Convention states as much. Not that anybody actually took any heed of the Geneva Convention. And that was the problem, again, with the Nuremberg trials is, first of all, they had to agree on what laws they were going to prosecute all these people of afterwards. And one of the main defense of any army at that time, right up until April 1944, was that superior orders. And if the army today is, well, you can deny an order. People do it all the time. You didn't deny. You followed orders back then. That's how the military is built. It's a hierarchy. That's how it works. And that was obviously going to be the main defense for the majority of the German soldiers. They were following orders. And already in 1944, April, the Allies knew that this was going to happen. The trial was going to happen. We're going to get these guys. So we're going to take away that as a defense option entirely by just ruling out, allowing them to do so. But of course, then the German Defense Council would then look at the British or the American Army handbook and say, well, you cannot be prosecuted, where it said until April 1944, you cannot be prosecuted for following an order, even if it's an illegal given order. It's the responsibility of the officer who gave it, which then was changed in 1944 April. So specifically in order to deny the Germans that defense, which is something quite outrageous. Then you had another defense the Germans would use, or should use, was "you did it too." I can't remember the Latin term for it. There's a Latin term for it. Fortunately, my Latin is terrible. Where you did it, and the Allies did it. Like if they were to blame the German Air Force for bombing civilian cities, well, the Germans could certainly turn around and say, well, most certainly you did it too, just far more than the Germans did, because capabilities. That was also ruled out as a defense. So now you take away the valid defense points of the German defendants, one by one, to the point where they literally had no way of defending themselves. They even came to an internal, amongst the judges, to an internal agreement that if the defense council brought up some of the sticky things that the Russians did, and the Russians were the ones that were keen on this trial, although when it really boiled down to it, they kept postponing all the time. Their head judge kept getting malaria and having sick because, of course, they were just taking orders from Moscow, and they were getting a little worried. They're getting a little bit worried that maybe some of the defense council are going to bring up some of all the atrocities the Russians have committed. Not to mention the millions of Germans they already kidnapped and brought east: women, children, slave laborers, prisoners. And that was another thing I was going to bring. Of course, they were going to convict the SS. They were going to convict Speer and others of using slave laborers. But what did the Allies do in 1945-46? They took German Axis prisoners and rented them to the French for $5, $8, and $11 a person to work and die in French coal mines. They did exactly the same as the Germans had done. And we're supposed to be the victorious Allies standing on moral high ground, and we are better than this. And they outright sold prisoners of war. Geneva Convention, which both Britain and America and France signed on to, you're not allowed to send prisoners from outside of the captured entity. And here they are renting them and selling them to die in slave mines. They eventually stopped when it came out that the French were actually treating these people so bad that they were dying by the droves, that they couldn't in good conscience continue doing that. So we're being back to the French. Well, they did the same thing to the Germans afterwards as the Germans did to them during. So have we learned anything? Yeah, bring me one. And that's when you get to the industrialists. They wanted to try Krupp, because of course Krupp was one of the main industrialists in charge of producing war materials from World War I to World War II. Well, problem came on when you then get to the Nuremberg trials, and Jackson was very big on, let's get some of the industrialists and some of these financiers on trial, because they are the ones who made all this possible. And that's, I think, is one of the takeaways we should take away. From the whole episode I did is, how does war happen? How does bad things happen? It happens because somebody can finance it, and that's thereby making it happen. It doesn't happen because people on the streets, civilians, decide that, well, we really don't like our neighbors. We're going to invade them. Nothing happens by accident. No revolution starts by accident. There are no grassroots movements that sprung out of nowhere, made it big, and made a difference. They are all sponsored and funded by someone. You look at BLM in America. Without Soros money, where do you think they would be? Nowhere. If it hadn't been for all of these individual, and you have all these environmental terrorists that are running around Europe, gluing themselves to paintings and roads and other things, and demonstrating coal mines, despite the fact that people are freezing. Well, they're being funded by someone. Nothing comes from nowhere. Germany's rise out of World War I did not come out of nowhere. It was deliberately crafted and funded by somebody who supported Hitler as the right man to be put in charge of this for a reason. So we're back to, did they believe they could control Hitler? Did they know what he was going to do? I don't think Hitler had any intention of going to war against France and England. And we have to remember, France and England declared war on Germany. It was Hitler's gamble that they were not going to do this. And there's a lot of correspondence between the Ribbentrop and Hitler. The British Foreign Ministry intercepts that the Germans had, giving Hitler an indication that if he went into Poland, the British would do the same as they had not done when he went into Czechoslovakia. Nothing. He was wrong. And the British, of course, came out and declared that before Hitler went into Poland, that they were going to, he even postponed Operation White, literally with a few hours. There was actually a week before it actually happened, because he was going to try to do the final deal with the British. And the interesting thing about that, there was actually German units. There was a couple of German units that had already crossed the frontier into Poland that had not gotten, smaller units, sabotage units, advance units, that was then caught and killed by the Polish a week before. So the Polish knew that there was invasion coming, because it almost jumped off at that time, but they didn't get the stop order. It was a very last minute thing. And then, of course, he went in the week after, and then the British and the French declared war. And then we had the silent war, where nobody did anything really, a little bombing here and there, but they sat and stared at each other for that entire winter, giving Hitler another idea that, well, they really don't want him. We can negotiate a way out of this. I think there was always an expectation of Hitler to rearm, deliberate support by industry for him to rearm and go east. And I think all of the industrialists and bankers that supported Hitler wanted him to go east and get rid of communism. And then things spiraled out of control. So we can then say, well, why did the British finally react? What would World War II have looked like if the British had just sat by one more time? I don't think that Hitler would have gone to France or anything in the West if the British had done nothing. That would, of course, lead to a whole different world picture, because then Germany would have generated its entire industrial might and quite possibly have beaten Russia. And then, well, I guess we wouldn't be having a Ukraine war today, because everybody would be speaking German. So, it is a lot of what ifs. But you look at the same thing now. You go forward to the Ukraine war today. Why is this happening? On the surface of it, well, Putin is the bad guy who wants to go to war. He wants to get Ukraine back into the fold of communist Russia. But why did that happen? And why has the American president denied any peace initiatives, even from the get-go? Biden always said no peace, didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to allow peace initiatives and keep putting money into this. It is now, from what I could see, very well documented report that the Americans blew up the pipeline, which I think was suspect of most of us to the very beginning. And from that report, it was cited that this was very much only on Biden's orders, against the advice of his security staff, of the naval component that did it, and his security advisors. So what happens when you have a, oh, Mr. Ford, oh, of course, Mr. Ford, Ford, he got to keep his factories, and he probably got to keep his medal from Hitler as well. Yes, I mean, who would take it from him? After all, he was part of the ones who won the war. All those good German trucks that came out of the Ford factories during the war and right after the war was over. Volkswagen was the first factory built. I cannot believe that you have not all gone to my road and seen the history of Volkswagen and the British soldiers that saved the Beetle. Why are you not on my road yet? I just need 29 more people so we can monetize that and fuel our trips this year. Anyway, another shameless plug there. My Road, that's my other YouTube channel. That's where the movies and the bike stuff's going to go. But I did a little thing on the bug, and I didn't actually know that the Beetle was the first. The Volkswagen factory is a really cute story about how that was resurrected by a British officer and hired. Well, thank you, foreign correspondent. By the way, I need a foreign correspondent T-shirt. By the way. I am planning on going to the Ukraine in a couple of months to see what's going on there. If I can get the meetings there I want, but that's a different story. So back to Ukraine again. You're now looking at a financial quagmire. Everything that's going on in the Ukraine, as far as I can see, besides the fact that Ukrainian people are suffering, is that we have two fairly corrupt regimes. Well, I guess we can take the Biden regime, like three then. And everybody's making money on this, and people are dying because somebody wants this war to keep going. Nobody wants this to end. Everyone wants to keep going. And just like World War One, and like the Franco-Prussian War, Krupp did not want the Kaiser to stop the Franco-Prussian War after they had to kick the French out of Germany in 1871. Because they were selling weapons to everybody. Just like World War II, everybody was making money on this thing. Although, most certainly, it was obvious that this was going to be a war that had to end, had to be fought on to the end. There's not going to be a standstill where you can say the Franco-Prussian War, while they fought, they beat the French, the Prussians and the Germans, they beat the French. And then they went back home and let France get on with the Fifth Republic at this time. So there was no occupation. Napoleon III was not executed. He was not put on trial after the Franco-Prussian War. And World War I, yes, the Kaiser abdicated, but there was no trial. People were not put on trial. They were not again executed after the war had ended. The fighting stopped and everybody went home. After World War II, they wanted to absolutely punish Germany and get rid of the top. No leaders in such a... The Nuremberg trials were the first trials ever like this before. They had no intention. There's never been a trial of warring nations like that, like there have been ever since, like with Saddam Hussein or in Yugoslavia. Now you put people on trial for war. And that's another thing about the Nuremberg trials, which was a problem, was that, and that is one of the more substantial problems of the Nuremberg trials' legality, is that everything the Germans did, okay, they broke some treaties, which should be between them and the country they broke a treaty with. The joke with Ribbentrop was his staff had built him a large wooden box to keep all the treaties in that he had signed in the 30s. And the joke being that, well, that we only have one we haven't broken since. But that is not necessarily a big picture for international law. But what they tried the Germans for during the Nuremberg trials were laws they wrote up in August of 1945. After all the acts had been committed. And again, you cannot, by international law at the time, try people. If there's no law, there can't be a trial. And a lot of the things the Germans did, believe it or not, there were no law against. they wrote up the laws afterwards to fit the crimes, so they could make certain that they could actually get these people. Which is again, it's another stain on of credibility on the Nuremberg trials, and that's, I think, is why historians ever since have been so busy trying to dissect the German experience, the World War II experience, the situation, and why there are so many unanswered questions, because it wasn't, again, like I said, the thousands of documents were burned by the prosecution, which means they're now a hole in history where we only have statements of defendants or their people afterwards. All the documentation had been destroyed, so they could deliberately get these guys in the gallows, and that is for history a very sad thing. Um, Lockheed Martin is what material does Lockheed Martin make um, that's being delivered to the Ukraine or wherever it goes after it leaves here? I'm pretty sure we send it to Ukraine, and then half of it gets sold somewhere else around the world, which is why we keep finding it. Um, um, anyway, speaking of what we were talking about, but that's so we have the two question marks I had to myself. And Machine, you're welcome to jump on if you want. The two questions that I have from my own episode is one about a train and one about the gold teeth. And for some reason, I'm just blanking out on names on everything. But there's a smelting company that smelted. Everybody who died at the concentration camps, died, killed, expired, whichever way, murdered, however they died. Their gold teeth fillings were pulled out, wedding rings and all that stuff was taken from the beginning. So that's why at all these camps you had all this various gold. And a lot of this gold we've seen all this footage, and be very weary of your lying eyes, because a lot of times you'll see footage of one thing that looks like what it is, but it might not be. And this is what I started thinking about this as I read it, because it just struck me as odd. At Auschwitz, for instance, they had a smelting company. This company was, I think, subsidiary to IG Farben, if memory serves, where they smelted down all the gold that was taken, and then that was smelted down into small bars that was sent onto the Reichsbank. After the war, we were then told that we were shown all this dental gold and all these bits and pieces in boxes at the Reichsbank. And that sort of brought me to the question is how those two things contradict each other. If there was a smelting plant at Auschwitz that smelted down all the gold, the dental gold, the rings, whatever have you, that was put into gold bars sent to the Reichsbanks, how did the dental gold end up in the Reichsbanks on its own without having been smelted down? I mean, it's not an extensive operation to smelt down gold into bars. It doesn't take a whole lot. It will be an easy setup for most camps, and you would think this, for a lot of different reasons, not sending dental gold into your bank would be well. It probably is just, you probably shouldn't. It's a bad idea. I could just see that being a bad idea. So, but we still see the pictures of the boxes of this dental gold. The American GI is pouring out of a box that was found somewhere, and I'm just wondering, how did that escape being smelted down into bars as we expected? And I don't have an answer for that yet. I would like to have an answer of that, because, I mean, of course, it's all possible for something to happen, and then they couldn't smelt down these boxes, and they just sent it as was. It's just a thought that came to me that I don't understand exactly. And then there's another thing is that I said very clearly, and I've always sort of maintained that I don't believe the gold train story. I just, and as we saw in the episode, as I talked you through how all of this gold, these millions of tons, went to the Reichsbank, was resmelted, sent on to Switzerland as payment for goods and services and what have you. If there was, I've always said that they would never let a large shipment of gold sit near the front lines waiting for the Russians to be 10 miles away before they start hauling it. First of all, because it was in all the occupied, ever since 1943, 42, 43, or ever since the Battle of Kursk, everything, Germany was at its height of its power, at the furthest away from Berlin as the lines could be. So from that point on, the lines only got shorter. That means in 1942, 43, why don't I remember the dates right now? I'm sorry, I haven't slept much lately. Damn, I need more Prevagen. When it came to, so let's say 1943, Germany sat on as much gold and assets as it possibly would possess, as far as the armies would get. That means all the gold within that sphere of influence would already have been accounted for by whoever was behind the lines. And as we stated, whenever the Germany took a country, they would take the banks, they would take the national bank, they would take all the gold, ship it back to the Reichsbank, resmelt it, or send it on to Switzerland, or do whatever they need to do with it. But it was accounted for and put into the war economy immediately. And since all of 42, the German army moved forward, by when we get to 43 and then 44, when the Russians start pushing the lines back, all of that gold would have been pulled back into Germany. So the thought of there in 1945 being a train full of gold sitting on somewhere or being taken from some bank somewhere, urgently pulled back to the Reich and not quite making it and then being hidden in Poland, I just do not see it. I don't see it as plausible. However, as I then just stated, the Americans found a train with some gold and silver boxes. Oh, was it for $11 million worth, or something to that degree? That disappeared. Well, of course, we don't exactly know how much it was because it was all stolen. Don't know who stole it. Was it the individual American soldiers that took it upon themselves and do a Kelly's Hero and drive it to Switzerland? Or was it an organized, if it had been, I know we all want to blame Dulles for everything. If it had been a Dulles or CIA thing and they had organized a heist because there was this, it was gold and silver from a local bank, smaller bank. Don't know if it was from Breslau or it was from Czechia or Czechoslovakia, as it was at the time. There were smaller banks that still had deposits closer to Germany that were pulled in. And this thing was found in Austria, I believe, which was still considered part of the Reich, which means why had it not been used? Why? So it was possible, I suppose, that there was a gold train somewhere within Germany, being a train with some amount of gold that could have disappeared. Okay, granted, they could have been an armored train with some boxes of gold, the last minute stuff. Maybe Hanke in Breslau had stolen a bunch of gold and put it on a train. Although Hanke actually flew out of Breslau on it was on the siege by the Russians, surrounded. He had some trees chopped down and jumped on the plane in the middle of the night and hightailed it out of there. So he couldn't have carried a lot of gold with him. He would have kept it with him. He would have sent it on in advance to get it out from under the Russians. And that's why it's so, yes, technically it is possible that train wouldn't have been not in Poland. Poland was by that time almost entirely taken by the Russians. Not all of it. And so theoretically, a train could have left Breslau and got stuck on the very western part of Poland somewhere towards the later month of the war. I just don't believe it. And it wouldn't have been a large amount of gold in the sense that it would have made a difference to the war economy, because then it would have been registered. The Reichsbank would have known where it was, and they would have missed it if some Gauleiter like Hanke had stolen it. Um, I had no problem as thinking that Gauleiter Hanke, he was a former deputy to Goebbels in the propaganda ministry, and he had an affair with Magda Goebbels. Actually, because Goebbels and her, and they're always fighting. It's a whole different story. Actually, a very interesting story. We'll get to that in the next profile of Reich propaganda leader Goebbels at some point. But Hanke had sort of served his own story. But I could see he married rich as well. But people like him could have stolen some boxes of gold, appropriated whatever they had, and tried to sneak it out towards the end. It would have been hard for them to have left before it became danger close to the Russians. But again, I could go with smaller amounts of gold. Like I said, the ones that the Americans found, they found within the German Reich in Austria. So looking in Poland or Czechia, I'm not. It would take an extraordinary amount of documentation for me to believe it. I also heard the stories about how gold trains and material trains were running every night, east to west, and that Skorzeny was part of it and witnessed it through Czechia into Austria towards the latter stages of the war. There are all these stories, and it's a nice romantic story, and we'd all love to find a train, but a train full of gold, I'm not. I have a problem with it. But the individual, and this is Donovan, I would think, if anybody. Interestingly enough, Donovan spent quite a bit of time in 45 in China, which was somewhat interesting. I don't really know what he was doing there, but he did not get the Nuremberg he wanted, and they were trying to make it an OSS style trial, where the OSS had pressured witnesses, coerced, lying, torture, all the usual gamuts to get the show trial they wanted. And that's really is what it was. Which is why I think in the light of honesty, it would be nice to retry the whole thing today with having it a fair and honest trial with all information we have today. That's what I would like to see. And of course, the industrialists that Jackson really thought he wanted to. Jackson had a good idea, had a good head on his southern shoulders there. He wanted to put the industrialists on trial because he knew they're the ones that made the war possible. Gee, I wonder who have that changed. Aren't they still? Then it gets to the industrialists trial where, like I said, pretty much everybody of the directors of IG Farben were acquitted, given very light sentences, and went straight back to, hey, Tom, and there's gold in Breslau specific to that region. Breslau gold, yeah, okay. Got it. All right, I got it. It's an interesting story, and it's a little bit of a romantic story. It'd be interesting, but anyway, like I said, with the IG Farben, they all ended up back in business. Very, very small sentence. And the head of IG Farben, bringing me back to what Joseph's point was, of a lot of these people were being sheep dipped so they could continue afterwards. The head of IG Farben fled Germany in late 44 or early 45, citing he was about to be arrested. He was about to be arrested by the Gestapo, and he went off to, not Argentina, he went off to South America to start setting up the banks and the funneling transfers of money and assets. So it was late 44. Of course, that should, and he didn't do well. He got to prison, get some prison sentence, but very, very little. So basically, it worked. And but funny is, like, when we talk about AAG being broken up, well, they're still in existence, and so is Siemens. Now, Siemens, somebody asked about, now that I read for a second. Siemens, yes, 80% of Siemens was confiscated, their material, their machines, everything was confiscated. However, most of their main financial assets had been bought by an Austrian shell company. I'm sorry, a Swiss shell company, um, and transferred out of the country. So it was 80% of what was left in Germany and Austria and Czechoslovakia that was confiscated, which they knew that whatever was taken when it was there was taken when it was there. Oh yeah, no, Swiss not neutral, really neutral at all. No, they'll follow the money. Um, so Siemens rebuilt incredibly quickly. I will say that Siemens is the one company that does have a page on their website stating that they're very sorry about the things they did during the war. And like, all right, at least saying sorry is sorry. I went to Ravensbrück, which is with a women's concentration camp, which is runs against everything I believe in. Actually, the gentleman that blew the whistle on the Swiss and testified before Congress, he's a friend of mine, and I was sort of hoping he was going to join us here today. But the problem is he works nights, and so not only do we have night difference, opposite times, but also opposite times. So for some reason, we've been trying to get together and do a live because I wanted to hear his story. I want you to hear his story. He went to testify before Congress, and he most certainly was threatened by the Swiss, and he does not exactly hold a lofty position in Switzerland anymore. But he told, and they found out, and whistleblowers never seem to be protected as they said they're supposed to. Well, that was another thing that of documents. They found a requisition order from the IG Farben about Zyklon B deliveries to Auschwitz, which was sent to their delousing company, which the department, and there was only a partial note that was delivered, that was read up to the Nuremberg trials, because the entire manifest from the IG Farben said they sent practically the same amount of Zyklon B to German barracks, German camps, all the labor camps, also camps that was not in any way affiliated with death camps, as a delousing. There was proportionately not a larger amount that was sent to Auschwitz than would have been with other camps if it not been for the size, which is again a whole other can of worms of what that whole situation should absolutely. Zyklon B was originally for delousing, and if you go to Auschwitz today, you'll see the closed delousings. It's like a compressed room with a gas type doors where you put all the clothes in, and you put the Zyklon B in there, and it'll kill all the lice. That's how you delice clothing and barracks as well. And but that is the situation. All that has been said and done about the Holocaust after the war, because it has not proper been presented and documented and in the right way, that has left opening so many speculations and rumors and gossip. That is one thing that absolutely should have been dealt with differently entirely. All the same, Jack Snatcher said the same thing. The Swiss will never be compelled to come clean, because why should they? They paid their dues, and they screwed up their banking system, because now you can have secret Swiss bank accounts, which obviously is a extremely wealthy story and a big problem for me. Nowhere to hide my ounces and ounces of gold. But I can. You can take the other side of all of this, and you can justify it. You can justify why industrialists and wants their businesses to grow and globalize, bigger markets, profits, make money, That's what you have business for. You have a business to grow, to get bigger, to make money, to hire more people, to sell more product. That's why you have a business. And one of the biggest threats to running a business then and now is communism. Marxism, communism, all that insanity that they're regurgitating today as green agendas and all that other nonsense. It is all still rooted in communism. Nothing that's good for business, nothing that's good for industry. So if you see, and which is why we the CIA have fought wars against communism, perceived communism, in many places for that reason. We should be, America should be an anti-communist country because it runs against the very founding of our nation, the very belief system that we can all rise to be better than we were yesterday and create businesses. And the American dream runs counter to communism. So we should be an anti-communist country. And we should go after communism wherever it was, except now we're sort of half of us embracing it. And God knows what they're doing now. It's a little hard to dissect between all the layers. But back in the 30s, I can understand why, well, things were a little bit more black and white back then, a little more extreme for industrialists and bankers. Nobody wanted to fall under the communist yoke even then, so they support the other guy. And what happened after then? Well, you see a lot of the industrialists, like Thyssen. He was a big supporter of Hitler, wrote a book about how much money he gave him. But after the Kristallnacht, which was to a large degree instigated by Goebbels, Thyssen backed out because that's not what he was in for. 1940, he wrote Goering that he absolutely was not, he did not agree with the war. He wanted to have nothing to do with it. And incidentally, Goering didn't want the war either at all and had tried for a long time to make peace both in Czechoslovakia and in Poland and England. He kept his back channels running until 1942, until Hitler finally shut him down. Goering wanted the good life because he had 10 years of crap life after 1923, and up until 33, he had a horrible life and deprivation and drugs and poverty. So yes, Goering wanted the good life. He wanted to have fun. He did not want to go to war, but nobody wanted to listen to him. And Thyssen, nobody wanted to listen to him either, because now Hitler was in power. He already had everything he needed. So Thyssen fled to Switzerland and then to France. And sorry, I got a bird coming overhead. Thyssen's company was nationalized under the Wilhelm Gustloff Stiftung, where a lot of the other Jewish-owned, Thyssen was Jewish, were under the businesses that was nationalized by the Nazis from Jewish businesses that was kicked out or sold, or Thyssen. His business was nationalized, and he fled to France. And eventually, as Germany went to France, he was handed back over, and him and his wife spent some years in a concentration camp, but comfortable, not in he was kept in a comfortable confinement, I think the term was. And afterwards, he got a fine for $500,000 Reichsmarks. And the Thyssen story is interesting because Thyssen's original bank in Amsterdam was set up in end of World War I in order to get the Kaiser's funds out of Germany unscathed from reparations. And Thyssen's bank in Argentina in 1945, 46, 47 was the one that processed all the gold and diamonds and foreign currency that went from Germany, or the former Reich, to Argentina, where the bank eventually closed in 47. Thyssen died in 51. So, yes, you can see the industrialists, they're very much on board with the anti-communist cause, but they were not on board with the methods, the anti-Jewish programs, and probably not. Then the thing is, like Thyssen, he did not want to approve of the war. You can then ask yourself, what did you expect Hitler was going to do with this enormous war machine that you all managed to make possible for him to build? I mean, yes, you have to have a strong country and a strong military so you can protect your borders and your country. Every country should have that. Germany had that. But at some point in time, when are you going to start listening to what the man says he's going to do? Austria wasn't a problem. Czechoslovakia, it didn't go over well, but it went. And active war against the Polish. Well, what did Thyssen expect Hitler was going to do? How did he think this was going to play out? How did the other industrialists think this was going to play out? Yes, they do play both sides, except in this side, the other side were the Russians, and communists didn't really play them. There was not much to play, except they were during World War One, where after the Tsar had been killed by the communists, the Russia still owed America an enormous amount of money, and Britain as well, which they were hoping the communists was going to honor and pay for, which is why they tacitly kept quiet. But during World War One, after World War One, Russian Revolution time, the Allies, the British Navy, was fighting the communists actively. There was an American contingent in Russia fighting with the White Russians against the communists. So we were actively then fighting against communism. Of course, and that is the one thing that we can then absolutely blame FDR on. He is not my favorite person. FDR is not my favorite person by far. First of all, because he appeased Stalin. I guess as a good Democrat would, he appeased Stalin throughout. And he let Stalin take Berlin, Prague, Vienna, in the entire industrial region of Thuringia, that he handed all these capitals over to the Russians to keep. Never lifted a finger for the Poles. His new great deal was inspiration for Hitler and his great work projects. And between him and Churchill, there's plenty of correspondence talking about how FDR was in favor of whole-scale sterilization of German men and women, civilians, after the war. That does not exactly make him a good person, if you ask me. Certainly, okay, sending war material to the Russians, fine. To keep them in the war, fine. But to the point where you are ready to hand them all of the countries whose freedoms you supposedly just fought for, whole scale. Yes, FDR is not I'm not a big fan. And so it's not an interesting note is when you look at FDR, who had a big falling out with Alan Dulles, who was sitting in Switzerland trying to negotiate with Himmler and Wolf and Schellenberg and the Baron to try to come to the peace Hitler would never agree to, where it was stipulated that Himmler had come to the offer that he could get rid of Hitler, but they wanted to keep fighting the Russians, which Dulles was okay with. I also have a report saying that Dulles was working with the Russians. Everything is counter to everything else. Nothing in this world is black and white, especially not his world. But the interesting thing there is Dulles was shut down by FDR, who actively started an investigation on Dulles and his communications with the German intelligence, which is what he was was there for. That's how intelligence works. You talk underground through backdoor channels with the enemy and their intelligence. That's how you avoid dumb things, or you fix small problems between the lines of war. And Dulles was furious with FDR, and I think it's interesting that. And I'm not reading any. I'm not making any claims here. I'm just saying it's interesting that after falling out with Dulles, FDR died, and after falling out with Dulles, Kennedy was killed as well. It just seems like don't piss off Dulles because bad things happen to you. But FDR was sick, and I don't think he was murdered. I don't think I would make that claim because he was not well and healthy. And it was his time. And it was probably good for the Germans that he actually died, because then there was a chance they might resurrect their country without being sterilized, deported, or killed, as it then happened. Um, Machine, you want to come on? And Churchill, yeah, but Churchill, he appeased the Russians just as much as what's his FDR. Hey, buddy.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
Not too bad.
Outstanding. So, and now I believe that Robert is in church at this very minute, and I
just got home.
Good actually. Thing one of us. He's home. Oh no!
Just got
no. Home. We're fuck's sake. Where's Machine at? Where are you not here? Because now we are. I guess now we're only 3 left.
Yes.
Yes. I guess we need to cast for a new mother. How are you feeling today, sir?
Oh, not too bad. Can't complain too much. Nobody ever listens.
And that's another thing that people have been writing me a lot about, Eisenhower's camps. And it's one of those things. And it was a Canadian that wrote a book about called Other Losses, and he got in a lot of trouble about how the Allies starved and killed German prisoners after the war. Open fields, no food, froze to death. He was, according to the book, several million Germans that was killed that way. Which is, again, would bring back to what happened to the Germans after the war. How far are you going to take this? And that's one of the things. If you read Jackson's diary, you will see that he was very much taken in by the destruction of Germany when he finally got there. He'd been through London, and so London had been bombed a little bit here and there. But when he got to Germany, and Berlin, and especially Nuremberg, and he really saw the destruction, he was quite moved by that, considering that he's about to put some of these people, to judge these people whose country they had completely destroyed, which was, Jackson had a hard job, but he tried. But you had several million Germans that was killed in the forceful relocation from where they used to live in Sudeten, Germany, and Czechoslovakia, and in East Prussia. Driven out of their homes or outright killed. And then you had several million more that died in camps potentially. And I always said I have a lot of you guys have written me and asked me to dive into that story. With the trepidation that diving into that story means that, considering what they did to the author who wrote a very well documented book about how the Allies set up camps that killed all these people outright. I'm a little. Yes, you have to be honest. You have to be realistic about the fact that there are certain topics that we are not allowed to talk about, because we will just be erased, like so many others have. And even if, and that there are some countries where you can't even have the conversation. And I was like, well, we should have the freedom to have conversations about the good and the bad and the evil and the ugly. But realistically, we're not. No. Which is now why we have the private website set up.
Can't talk about Canada's cure for depression.
You mean the T4 program?
Yeah, that wonderful thing.
We'll send you a nice doctor with some medicine. You only have to take it once.
The Machine's in the back room.
He's in the bathroom?
Back room. In other words, he's below us.
He is?
Yeah.
I don't see him.
That's what he said. Unless he's on the wrong link. But he's supposed to be in the back room because he's messaging me. Telling me to yell at you to get him on the screen.
I mean, I only have 2 screens. We should be here. I mean, Huh. All right, you just send me the link. All right, I'll send you the link. All right, I will send it to you. Hang on. Hang on. Where are you, bastard? Where is private chat? There we go. No, wait a minute. I can't send you the link. I can't paste it to him here because he's not here.
I got it.
You got him?
Yeah, I got it.
All right, good. Well, for those of you who don't know, Robert is running the website and the Lost Battlefield shop and helping out with that. And Machine
And
is
also, if
thinking.
you get a like on a Twitter post, it was probably me. Full disclosure.
I have no idea who I'm following on Twitter. I will
me.
say. Move to the right, Rob. Machine. Move to the right. Yes, that right. No, the other
other
right.
side.
The other right. The other right. That way.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
There you go. Now you're in front.
Right.
That's my left. So when you said right, I'm like,
that's my right. So
yeah.
There. So, and then there was only 3 left.
Yes.
And for those of you who...
You know, I was thinking about it the other day. I run another history channel. I started that with a friend of mine, and he used to write all the scripts. And then I would just do the editing and the stuff like that I like to do. I don't like writing. And I thought about it the other day after Crystal passed. We started the newsletter with the understanding that Crystal would write it. I would just send it out to everybody. Now I get to write it. This is the second time this has happened to me.
And for those of you who may have joined us since Crystal have passed, and that's why we're referring to us only being 3. She passed a few days ago in the hospital after having 3 consecutive strokes and ended up on a respirator, and that was it. And she was the like I said, she was the mother hen of all of us that sort of kept us all sort of. And you're wearing the Crystal shirt.
Yes, I am.
Get you up in. How the hell do I get you in? Hang on, I'm gonna.
Square.
Yeah. That was Crystal saying about spiders. How do I do? No, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to try to find out how I can put you in full screen, but I can't figure out how to do that because I'm an idiot. So
go to his square in the bottom. There'll be a square in the top left corner. Click that.
You mean that one?
Yeah.
There you go. All right. That was always Crystal's thing about spiders, calling them spooters. And I see that a lot when we chat and I say spooters and we got a live episode and somebody go like, what is that? What are you talking about? And well, now I'll have to be nice to spiders. And so Robert, I have an idea of how Machine, if you can print that out as a 1 picture, then we can put it on the shirt, right, Robert?
Yeah, I can. If I have a JPEG of it, I can throw it on a shirt.
Yeah, I thought about that. Pierre, she passed away a few days ago. She had 3 strokes consecutively. Went to the hospital, and she never came to. And her husband was there. Her daughter was there to see her, although she was not conscious towards the end. And she had lost, after the second stroke, she had lost 50% of her physical movement in one side of her body and brain function as well. So, and as I said to her husband yesterday, the life the 2 of you would have had if she had somewhat come back to and would have needed rehab, being 50% paralyzed with 50% of brain capacity. I don't think she would have wanted that. And that's just me thinking out loud. I don't think I would want that. And maybe this is just the way it's supposed to be. At 59, it's not the way it's supposed to be, but
sometimes it's a better mercy to go than to keep fighting.
it is. Where are you gonna go from when half of you is not working?
Yeah.
And I think my mom made that same conscious decision. And she had a stroke too 5 days before in the hospital, having her leg amputated, that she really didn't want to live without being intact. And then when that finally dawned, she had a stroke and she never really came back. And I don't think she wanted to. And according to all her friends, I don't know why Crystal and my mom, they both were stubborn people, a little bit of remind me of each other. I think I get it. I think I get it.
Well, due to my own family's history and stuff like that, I mean, I gave my wife a talking to one night because I had on the same side, mind you, one grandparent passed away from Alzheimer's, the other one from dementia. I literally told my wife, I said, if there ever comes a time where I don't remember who I am, I was like, you know what to do. And she just looked at me cross-eyed. I said, you put that, and I'm not going to say what it is, put that in my lap and walk away. Because I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be the prisoner in my own mind, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if with some Alzheimer's and other things, I guess you forget the bad things too then, right?
We could hope.
I will only participate in that as long as I can use the excuse, I have Alzheimer's, so I can't pay that bill because I don't remember using any of that shit.
I just like the guy from Waiting. He goes, I can walk around giving little kids the finger. Because every day is
an adventure. But I mean, I do believe that they found the testing a new cure for Alzheimer's, or was that Parkinson's?
I think it was Parkinson's.
Anyway, so clearly this is not the medical program. So what are we going to do about the? Am I being wrong to dissect the post-war treatment of the Germans? Because it just bothers me, or I mean, it's understandable from one point, absolutely, yes, and it's not an indictment on why stupid guys did what they did, as much as we can't go into the future with this being moral superiority complex that we were so much better given the way we behaved afterwards. Is that entirely wrong?
No, I'm on the fence with that because I do believe that they kind of brought it on themselves for what they've done, but at the same time, we should be the better man in the situation.
I mean, the women and children didn't bring it upon themselves, and the soldiers who were called up didn't.
Well,
that's where it gets complicated.
I always look at it like this. If you listen to, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, if you listen to most documentaries that went over the Blitz and the bombing of Britain, it was always, how dare they do this? But let's not talk about how they flattened, from about France all the way to Germany with carpet bombs.
Including quite a bit of
France. Not speak of that, but how dare they bomb London?
Right, but remember, there was a lot of things that in that area that it wasn't us; it was the Germans that was flattening the shit too. You can't forget that. But we did do, Bomber Harris really did have some fun though, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, we killed more Frenchmen on D-Day than we killed Germans.
Yeah, they for some reason the French decided to stick around. The Germans are like, "Screw it, we're out of here."
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, there's a village near a German truck. Let's flatten it.
If the Germans are running, run with them.
So am I? I cannot help but just to bring it home till today, I cannot help but to to draw the parallels between what was going on in the 30s of the support for the Nazi Party to when I see all these celebrities and stars and royalty going to Davos.
Mm-hmm.
It looks the same, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just me?
Whatever will get the vote or the nod.
I mean, it really is a similar, because the Nazis in the 30s, they had all sorts of royalties and businessmen and celebrities. That was all big on that. That's why they had a big the SS had a great recruitment amongst European royals. And let's not talk about the royal influence in Britain.
Right.
So when I see all these people in their new interesting creation of world domination, it just looks the same to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the EU, the UN 0.30.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, just follow the money. That's usually where it goes. Just follow the money.
War is lucrative.
It's war is. But are these people looking at getting us into a new war? Because it seems that they're trying to destroy the world economies by their insanity. At least back then, they were trying to build and make more money.
War
At least there was a
profitable.
motivation back then.
Peace is not. War is profitable. Peace is not.
Okay, my background here is just driving me absolutely insane. It keeps cutting my head off. My arms are missing. I'm about ready to shut the background off.
But that's always been my theory. War is profitable. Peace is not.
No, absolutely. And we see that in Ukraine.
Especially
really
wars
cool.
you don't have to fight in. Those are very profitable. If you can just supply the arms, you're laughing pretty.
What was the British joke of was it British or the American joke of World War One? Is that we're going to fight the Hun until the very last French soldier.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, well, that's. I was gonna say there's always a saying that's been going around for years, and you know which one I'm talking about. Is the most terrifying phrase ever uttered is "I'm from the government. I'm here to help." There's no such thing, and
was that Reagan that coined that?
Yep, and it's not just with us. I mean, it's with the world all over. If the government says I'm here to help, run, because they're gonna mess something up.
Oh, they are.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're doing a wonderful job of messing things up for all. Yes, they.
Yeah, bring on the questions. That's what we're here for.
Yes, they are. Is there any interest in showing the secondary players under the known companies and big movies of the post-war era? Secondary players, as in, elaborate a little bit more, D-Man.
I believe he's talking like you were talking about earlier, like Siemens, IG Farben, Ford Motor Company, stuff like that. I believe that's.
I thought that I would classify them as primary players, which is
well, Ford was considered. Yeah, we would consider him a primary, but technically he was considered a secondary by governmental standards.
And it was an IBM. Same thing. There were.
Yeah, IBM.
Well, there was before World War DuPont, yes. There were some 300 companies involved in Germany before the war, and from 1942, there was 174 still in business, one way or another. Which is interesting, but I think what's really interesting if you turn it the other way around and go like, okay, so you had all these American businesses that were in business in Germany. But what about all coming out of the war, all these German businesses that held directorships and ownerships of American companies in America?
Right.
Before, during, and after.
And considering one of them is a tractor factory known the world over that is the family, it's the family of a certain doctor, if you know what I'm saying. And that's how he got away. And that's how he died, of a heart attack in Argentina. That war was lucrative on both sides.
Yes,
absolutely on both sides. And you're talking about the Swiss banks and stuff like that. I mean, wasn't it the national law from 1907 till like right after World War II that the occupation powers could seize gold from occupied countries and ship it to Switzerland? I mean, isn't that?
No, yes. I mean, I mean,
Lend-Lease
Switzerland,
anybody?
Switzerland is in the money business.
Yeah.
Um,
They hold
all
the
right.
wallet.
Yes,
They
Bart
hold the
O'Mengele.
wallet for both sides. They only have to give one back.
All right. I'll give. Speaking of all the rocket scientists that came over, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about it. And FDR didn't want to have former Nazis over here working, and FDR was dead, and Truman sort of tried to stick to that.
Sorry.
So of course, Dulles and all the other guys whitewashed all these people, and they're all denazified so they can come over here and work.
I was holding back a laugh on that. That's
Honestly, I have no problem with that. And I say that too. Like if you wage war on me, and I eventually kick your door down and kill you, I will take all the weapons in your house, and they're now mine.
if you can't beat them, join them.
So if I invade a country and there's a whole bunch of really intelligent people that would now want to work for me, they're coming, even though they a week before were waging war on me, because now it's mine. That's the epitome of America is we invade something, we own it.
Yeah.
Until we flee in the middle of the night and leave behind a whole bunch of allies and 11 soldiers.
Following the British tradition.
So I mean, I totally understand it.
I mean, there too, buddy.
I mean, I could see it would have been a problem to hire Himmler to work for the FBI, maybe. I mean, maybe not the CIA, obviously, but and if the Americans had got it,
Borman.
Oh, I mean, Borman, he should work World Banking or something. He should work Wall Street.
Minister of Finance.
I mean, wasn't that what I said? I wonder if Sullivan and Cromwell, they have a Borman client file.
Yeah.
I mean, they were in contact, obviously.
Yeah, well, there's no arguing that.
No. So it's like I sent them emails, asked if they had. They did not respond
on that one.
Yeah, it's like, and you can't really. That's why the whole frustrating thing is about why the CIA won't spill the beans on Kamala, is because we already knew they had Klaus Barbie working for him, and considering what Klaus Barbie's job was during the war of hunting partisans and get them trialed and killed and tortured, I could see why he would be a compromised person more so than a von Braun. And you say, well, von Braun and Dornberg and all these guys, they used slave labor. Yes, but everybody pretty much did in Germany. It's not that there was any piece of German war material or research or anything that was not being built and constructed without the use of slave labor. And it probably wasn't their decision, but we're back to the Nuremberg trials. They were told to do so, and here we are. Can you blame them for that?
That's one of the things that von Braun himself said. He said he did not want the slave labor. It was basically forced upon him, like, here, free labor, you're going to use these people. He didn't want to use them at all. He wanted to use, intelligent labor that was already good for what he was doing. They're like, no, here, have some of these half-naked guys that have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
Stuck with them.
I mean, I think that's what you could say, that
sabotage, which is why it's never a good thing.
No, I mean, that's what I say. If we redid the Nuremberg trials, you could take somebody like Speer, who would probably have hung by everything we know about him, because he came out and apologized, and he and everybody treated him nice, and he had special treatment in the prison. They were more comfortable and all that shit, because they needed one for the show trial to apologize. So Speer was it. And Jackson actually wanted to let him off entirely. But as we know, Speer he came up with the Industrial Revolution. He revamped the whole way of industries working to specifically incorporate prisoners of war and forced labor and slave labor. And he calculated that into his business method.
Yeah.
So he wasn't adverse to it. He embraced it.
Yeah.
So... then you can say, well, Sauckel tried to keep them alive. Even Himmler had written papers about how they need to be fed. Actually, and I thought that was interesting that Speer, middle of the war, he put out that survey of what would happen if we take chemical fertilizers away from the farmers entirely and refurbish that chemical production all in the war effort. And it would come out as it showed back then that, well, if you take fertilizer away, then, there's just not going to be enough crops and everyone's going to starve and people are going to die. And in 47, a lot of people in Germany starved to death outright. Right. So now we're back to, well, they're trying to cut away fertilizers today. Mm-hmm. And you're looking at, well, cutting down on farms, fertilizers, food, energy. Well, yes, we already knew back then that then people are going to die just like they're going to die now if they're successful in this nonsense.
And to answer the question in the chat, Rudolf Hess really didn't know much of anything. He was basically kicked out of the circle early on and just happened to be a puppet. And he was a good puppet. He was definitely a marionette. He did whatever he was told, but he didn't know jack shit. So when he got picked up, he only had the first couple years of Nazi ideology stuck in his head, and after that, that was it. I mean, he was useless.
Well, to elaborate to that, Bormann was always gunning for Hess's position as the deputy Führer or as the chancellor secretary, and Hess was an interesting person because yes, he was on board with the putsch, he was on board with the National Socialism, but he was not a politician. He was way too esoteric. He was into all sorts of interesting things. He didn't want the war. But as you came towards his flight to England, I genuinely think he went to England because he wanted to try to create peace, because he was so far out the loop, also fueled by Bormann's intrigues. And I know Schellenberg has written about how he would have psychics go read for Hess and then come back and report to him what they had told him, so he would know what to advise him.
Right.
So Hess was so marginalized at the end that he got on that plane.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if Hess was alive today, he would be an essential oil salesman. That's the only thing I can come up with him. I mean, he'd be essential oils and like crystals and rocks and shit, because the guy.
Yes, White House press secretary.
He would sit down. Yes, he would sit down here on Venice Beach with a whole bunch of incense and sell little crystal rocks. The thing about Hess, which was probably what kept him in prison for his entire life, because he absolutely did not. They could not find. And if you look at Jackson's papers, and he sent people. They were trying to horse trade who were going to put on trial, and of course, well, they had Hess. He was a big name. He's at that time been sitting in a British prison for 4 years. They sent people go through his papers, and it came back that they couldn't find anything on Hess or Dönitz, for that sake matter, or Reda, either, the Navy. But they couldn't find anything on Hess. There's nothing to prosecute him for, but because the British wanted it, the Russians wanted him, they stuck him on trial. And one thing is that he then got life, and they actually kept him here. And I think there has to be a reason why they locked him up. It was 30 years before he was allowed to see his son in prison. He was in solitary 20 years. He must have known something. And I think one of the things he knew, the only thing that makes sense, is that the British royalty, including the Queen at the time, was plotting against Churchill, because Churchill was following policies that would destroy the British Empire, which essentially it did. And I think Hess knew of the negotiations and these conversations within British royalty, which is why he flew to England with a letter. I'm sorry, that was the British king at the time, right? I'm sorry, not the Queen. He had a letter for the king that we're still allowed to see today, that he delivered. And I think he knew something that will be really embarrassing for the British, which is why he was never allowed out. Even though he was a crackpot and he pretended to have amnesia, the British state, they tortured him. They gave him true serum drugs. He tried to kill himself in England. There's also, he showed up in Nuremberg full of packages, full of proof, little food bits that they tried to poison him and do all sorts of stuff. So there's something going on with Hess other than just a kook on a peace mission. And the British
I like
royal.
what David said.
Hmm?
I like what David says. Yeah, David Cameron there. He says, now Spandau Prison having been flattened, there's a supermarket. Local Brits call it Hesco.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. He was the sole guy hanging out there. So,
I mean, it should be. I mean, he should. First of all, he should probably never have been in prison to begin with. There was no evidence he really did anything except he was there. And what was keeping Spandau alive was one place where the four allies and three allies and the Russians could actually meet during the Cold War, because they always had 2 months terms, taking turns of who was in charge, and everybody hated the Russians when they were there as the jailers. But there was a point where the various Cold War factions could actually meet and maybe have conversations, which is something that they don't talk much about. But, still, even the Russians wanted to let Hess off towards the end, where the British said no. Yeah. And then the Americans killed him. So it's like Hess never had a chance, but there's got to be a reason for that. And I think some of that must be in the British files.
I'm assuming, just going off of the way it played out, I'm assuming the reason why they kept him locked up is because they didn't want the last living hierarchy of the Nazi regime out in the public.
That's also a reason. But
I think that's what it came down to. I mean, to be honest with you, I believe it'd have been more humane to just fucking. Sorry.
There was one.
Him,
There was one thing that was strange because he was never allowed to have a free conversation with his son about anything. They were not allowed to talk about the war at all, which is even when he finally got to visit his dad. Which is another thing. Like what I think Hess has something to say or something to tell that he was just simply not allowed to. Although, yeah, it does make sense. And of course, the Hess family grave had been completely destroyed and all the bodies destroyed and tossed to the winds, as usual.
Yeah, they did that to quite a few, though.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the same. We're back to Bormann, and I'm still saying that Bormann died in South America, and they dragged his body back to Berlin and dumped it in a hole somewhere for it to be found. Right before that book came out about Bormann's survival, to prove that it specifically was there.
That I can get on board with Bormann, but the whole Hitler and Argentina thing was not. His personality, the way he ran things.
Yeah.
He didn't leave. He died right there because he was not. He wouldn't let himself go.
I'm gonna have to go with that too. I mean, I'll be willing to entertain any possibility. I mean, let me see some evidence.
My thoughts with that would be always, if he did, he would have surfaced. At some point, he would have surfaced.
Yeah, he was too arrogant, too self-absorbed, and too a person that thought that he was a living god. So he would have been. He would have popped up 10, 15 years later and be like, "Hi, how you doing?"
Accordingly, Bormann kept him under wraps in South America and pretty much isolated with a couple of people, where he eventually expired. He also supposedly had another child with a Berlin gymnast in 1937, whom he had an associate marry her to cover that up, and he divorced her right after the war was over. But there's another Hitler relative there somewhere, plus the one in France. And then, of course, supposedly Eva had 2 kids post-war. But that's the thing about Bormann. The DNA they pulled of the Bormann body was only the mitochondrial DNA, which can only be tested to relatives of the mother, which means that the way it was done, let me see if I'll undersimplify that. I don't know what I'm talking about. It means that Bormann had 5 known children that we know of, and then supposedly had a child or 2 after in South America. I mean, Bormann was a horn dog, and
I was going to say that we know of. I mean,
that we know of. He was a virile man, let's put it that way. And if he spawned after the war, and you pull all types of DNA, you can test that DNA towards the post-war child. The DNA they pulled, you can't do that. And they tested it against some I have no doubt that the body they eventually, because they found quite a few bodies claiming to be him, except there was always something that didn't match. The dental was wrong, other things were wrong. And then by the way, finally get the dental right. I think, sure, it was. I have no problem with it being Bormann's body, but they didn't test it against his son that was living in Berlin. They tested against some far-flung uncle something, and then they destroyed the body.
Right.
But the DNA can't be tested against kids. And why didn't they do the right job?
And at the end of the war, the only thing that they found of Bormann, the link to Bormann, was his uniform outside the chancellery.
Yeah,
that's all they found. They found nothing else.
Yeah.
And when we went to over Salzburg and got into the houses and stuff like that, one of them was Bormann's. Okay, Bormann's was burnt or blown and burnt. But one thing that they noticed is there was not a lot of personal effects left in that house. And it wasn't from looting, it was just not there. So that makes you wonder.
You want to come on and talk about this? I would like to talk to Mr. Barrett about what he heard.
Monka.
Just saying, if you feel like chatting, I think we would like to hear that story. Right?
The only story I got from SS was one that was I think Robert, didn't I tell you about it? About the guy we ran into at the World War II reenactments?
Oh yes.
that guy creeped me out, man.
But either way, even if Hitler survived or not, really for the bigger picture doesn't matter, because even if he had survived, he was an irrelevance at that point by the mere default that he didn't do anything. He didn't try to rise a Fifth Reich. He didn't show up for the election of the EU and run for president. Deservingly, he should have had that. But it's his idea, right? It was Bormann and the money, and the whole idea that Bormann would have stapled away $1 billion or $1 billion, well, fuck, once $1 billion in that time, and gold and assets and all the business he did, only to try to cling on to a tank, get out in the last minute. I'm not buying it. If I have that much to live for, not to mention a family and kids, I'm sorry, mein Führer, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So, and the Russians spotted a plane leave with what they surmise was Bormann and Müller in a Chrysler Storch that just barely clipped the treetops getting out of Berlin in one of the last days. That I could believe. And it was like, yes, there's plenty of ways for Hitler and everybody else to have gone out of. Oh, I'm so sorry, Barrett. I don't know. I thought you were he. Sorry about that. Would you still like to come on and talk about the interrogation? I'm very curious. Or at least send me an email afterwards. Just saying. It's hard when there's no. It's hard enough these days to call people if you're a boy or a girl looking at pictures these days. It's not impossible if you just have the last name. This is not something Hitler would have approved of. So there you know, at least the New World Order is not run by the old Nazis. They would not have approved of this gender confusion. Can you call it that?
No, you got to have some way to distract the populace. Just saying.
Yeah, when you make them question if they're a man or a boy or a girl, that is pretty damn distracting.
Did you just assume gender?
Yes, I did. I did. I did from a last name. That's because I know a Barrett as well, and he's a him. That's why when I see Barrett, I know. But Lady Barrett, please get in touch. I would love to hear your story, and I'm sure other people would as well. My email is somewhere. Correspondent. See, yeah. Now we have to. Now we have to insist people they have pictures on their what's that GIF? That's a Avatar, isn't it? The little picture in the corners. Right. But yeah, so I could see, and that was always the Borman, the Trinity, and the Kamala that disappeared, that had a reason to, and something to live for. And if they had installed the dark, I don't know what I'm going to say, the dark world behind all these businessmen and all this afterwards, there is one interesting theory about it. Somebody asked me what happened to all the Borman's money and the gold and all that. And there's an interesting story that was written about in a book that I can't remember what it's called. Well, I think it was Gerard Williams, maybe. I don't remember. That we always knew. We know that Perón in Argentina was a big supporter of the German community and vice versa. Kept his hand over all the Nazis and the gold and all this. And Perón, of course, was married to Evita Perón. Eventually became. Who was a bit of a hottie, and everybody in Argentina loved her. However, with the interesting, if you look into that relationship, by far she was smarter than he was. In fact, every time you look up Perón from Argentina, you see him sort of like blank-eyed stare with his mouth half open. He really doesn't look like a very intelligent guy. In fact, he was overthrown in 1951 because he had an affair with a 13-year-old, and he brushed it off in a joke. And in a very Catholic country, that did not go over well at all.
What do you think he is, Jerry?
After Evita died. But when it comes to, so Borman had met with Evita and with the Peróns. There's a lot of spying that she was involved in. And when she went on her world tour of peace, or whatever she called it, in 46 or 47, she met with Borman in Italy, supposedly, after he had all the money had been funneled into Argentina, after supposedly Hitler was there. We had all the Nazis were in Argentina. The infrastructure was set up there. And then Evita they met in, she was in Italy, but they met in Switzerland. And Perón wasn't there, and she let him know that, by the way, I have now spoken to a bunch of your bank people and our mutual friends, and I have taken 80% of all your assets in Argentina, which is where Evita got all her money for all her charity work. So they stole Borman's gold. It's a supposed story. Whereafter, Evita was shot in the back of the head, and all the bankers died or disappeared. And a couple of years later, she died of cancer. But that is one of the stories of what happened to all of this. And I'm just saying that I don't know what documentation Gerard had for this. I think that was him that stated that. I say it's just as possible as so many other stories. It's just a little bit ballsy to hear. You're going to steal 800 tons of gold from a pissed off Nazi. That just seems like a really bad idea. But it could maybe there's more to Perón's downfall than we thought. Because if they double-crossed him with the Nazi infrastructure of all the people in Argentina, yes, they were watching over the Nazis, but on the other hand, they weren't all handed over when Perón was toppled, were they? So, where are Juan Perón's hands, though? Hands, though? David, what? Evita was an interesting character, and I don't remember in Madonna's movie that she talked about negotiating with the Nazis and taking money from them. I don't remember seeing that part of Madonna's Evita. But yeah, she was a smart lady, and that it is a possible story. But anyway, go against Borman than Biden. Isn't that about the same thing? No. You know what? Actually, I would, if you want to put it that way, Borman was a hell of a lot smarter than Biden is. Which is not hard. Even on the best of days, if it came to hiring, who are you going to hire as your private secretary, Borman or Biden? Right? So No. And I'm not talking about the senile vegetable. I'm talking about when they were both in their heyday.
Well, Biden's always been a potato. Now he's just a turnip.
Well, I saw the cucumber has now checked himself into Betty Ford?
Which one? You told me
Federline.
Oh yeah.
Well done. I mean, you really do pick some great candidates.
Hey, you guys.
I mean, I almost feel sorry for Federline that all the stuff they made him do, and I finally completely lost it.
Federline, yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, when that man walks, he's got scrapes on his knuckles. I mean,
well, I guess he's strapped to a bed now, so that's he doesn't have to worry about that. I mean, you can't make up American politics anymore. It's just or British, or Canadian, or EU. I mean, we do not have smart people like we used to back then. We still have smart industrialists and bankers, but the people they put in charge to run the show are not. And so did all these bankers and industrialists? Was Hitler just a figurehead who finally took over? I think they thought that.
I agree with that. I think like especially towards the beginning of I'm talking pre-33. He was just supposed to be the figurehead of the party. He was not supposed to be in control of shit. And once because of his his oratory, I mean, he was good at it. I think he talked him into letting him be in power, is what it is. I honestly do. I think he was just supposed to be a figurehead and just a talker, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, and that another lesson we can take away from that is, hasn't the bankers, the deep state, the intelligence, the industrialists have always put figurehead politicians who will preach their cause in many different countries. It's like there's very few people that start idealistic and competent and rise to the top and actually follow that. And we're back. There are no grassroots movements where some guy stands on a soapbox out here, and a year later he ran the revolution, took over the country, and got rid of all the bad guys.
And that's
rarely happens.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I think that's pretty much it. Somebody said I need a neck massage. You're absolutely right. I missed my chiropractor.
I mean, that's exactly the point, though. Like I keep telling everybody about the whole situation that's happening now. Over there in Europe, it doesn't matter which government you're looking at; they're all corrupt.
Yes,
every last one of them. It's just some of them are not as good at hiding it.
Yeah.
Like poor Kanekian stuck with the Trudeau of it. Justinian.
Well, the only reason Trudeau kept the reins is because they put a tool against him.
They used the patsy.
They put a tool against him. But
well, I mean, he's like, pardon the language here, but he's like the WEF's bitch. I mean, that's the best way to put it. That's what he is. Klaus Schwab has his hand right up his crack, and he's playing puppetry with him.
And as with about 50% of the Canadian Parliament, from what he bragged about,
right?
It was very funny. If you hear that speech, the next time there was a parliamentary meeting, and somebody stood up, and it was a virtual meeting, of course, because in Canada, Corona is way worse than anywhere else.
Oh, of course.
Somebody said they're all on Zoom or whatever they're on, and he stood up and said, "Well, since Schwab said that half of the Canadian government ministers are in his payroll on his side," or whatever he said, "I would like a show of hands on who that is." Where after the narrator, like, "Oh, your microphone is breaking up. We can't hear you." You remember that? We could all hear him.
No. The best.
I have that audio actually.
The way you know that they have said something they weren't supposed to, it's real simple. Congress will be called into break of session for about 6 months by Trudeau the day after.
Oh, okay. We don't want to talk about it. Yeah, right.
Or the other way that that the shit has hit the fan is Trudeau has COVID. Can't talk to anybody for a couple of weeks. He's only done that one 3 times.
Did you see the video of him literally, and I do mean literally, shitting his pants because he had to talk to the prime minister or the Chicom leader, and the Chinese put him in his place. It's on video. I mean, because remember, just not long before the summit, he was talking a lot of crap about China, and he had to stand there in front of him, and that guy put him in his place. And I mean, I swear to you, when he was walking away, he was straight legging, like he was trying to hide a turd in his pants because it was beautiful. But I mean, as much as I don't like the Chicoms, that was hilarious.
Did you find any of our weather balloons up there in Canada, by the way?
Couple.
Harry, yes, I know.
Did they find any of the weather balloons that we shot down, or did they find any of the missiles that went awry?
Did you see where they?
How the hell do you lose a missile?
It went that way.
It's gonna come down eventually. I mean,
yeah.
You think?
Did
it come down around a train station in Ohio?
Although, mind you, there are places in Canada where that thing could land and nobody would frickin' see it or hear it for the next 20 years because nobody goes there.
I mean it was in the middle of nowhere.
Further
right?
north you go.
Oh, you're talking about Quebec?
Well, that might be welcomed by the rest of Canada, but especially Alberta.
It's good.
And it's good. Do it again. Alberta might have a few things to say about that, but yeah.
So I have a theory about this whole balloon thing. It's a double reverse envelopment theory. Don't know what that means. I just made it up just because. So we what if this is one of those what ifs? So we shoot down the weather balloon after it's done its entire pass of the entire United States and filmed everything they wanted to film, and it's over the ocean and it sent all its information, and then we shoot it down when it no longer matters. Fine. So then we got all these 3 other balloons or weird things that show up, where one of them is probably a hobby balloon, one of those little cheap hobby balloons, weather transistors with a little transmitter and a GPS, and the other 2 I haven't heard about. But when Biden then comes out and said, as the president of the supposed free world, that we don't know what we shot down, but it's not a threat. It's the general sense.
It ain't a threat anymore. We shot it down.
Did you see that? They did a test balloon. I think it was in Oklahoma or somewhere, and the government went up and took it out. They couldn't find it. It was just a kid's test balloon for high school.
Right. But what if now? So there's at least one of these balloons that was supposedly one of those little private owned fun balloons. We can't find that. We can't find the other 2 either. Now, Richard Dolan said that one of them, the jet actually had to chase it. Which, all right, if it's caught up in the jet stream and it's moving, hauling ass. Although I don't remember balloons moving that fast. But what if... Now, it is embarrassing as all hell for a president to say that we shot something down, we don't know what it is, but it's probably not dangerous. That makes you seem like a complete incompetent idiot.
We shot it down, but we don't know if it's dangerous.
Yeah, if you know it's not dangerous, why did you shoot it down then? Where's the gun? Where's the
we need to get rid of?
Where's the gun camera footage? Where's the pilot's gun camera footage? And why, if it's just a weather balloon from some kid, can't the pilot say that? See this? Now, what if
they have machine guns? But
for one, but what if
$50 worth of rounds versus $5 million for a freaking, you know what I mean?
What if we shot down something really serious, but we don't want to tell him, so we'd rather go with an embarrassing story of it being a kid's hobby balloon, as opposed to actually saying this is something that's really bad we don't want to tell people about.
Well, right.
Or
Well,
the other
there's
way
several
around.
several things I want to add to this. One, there's nothing more American than the fact that in Montana they had to go on the news and tell them to stop shooting at the balloon. I loved it. I was like, first thing I did was I called a friend of mine in Montana. I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm not doing it." You heard him rack his rifle back. I was like, "Are you serious?" He goes, "No, I'm not actually doing it." He goes, "But it's funny, right?" I was like, "Yeah, they're telling you guys on the news to stop shooting at the balloon." But first thing, Jeff mentioned NORAD. I'm not even talking about NORAD yet. Let's talk about Canada. Canada let it go.
I'll get to that question, Jim, in a minute.
Yeah,
Go on.
Canada let it go completely across, and then it went into the continental U.S. Okay,
And we let it go.
we have billions of dollars in defense. We have billions of dollars in satellites, and a weather balloon, a supposed weather balloon, just sashayed its ass across two countries. Do you see something wrong with this picture here?
But we hadn't
they can zoom in on the
calibrated
beach
our
and see a woman's
equipment.
titties, but they can't see the balloon. And
But we hadn't calibrated we haven't dialed the knob in to see balloons. Remember, we don't have a problem of anything overflying the United States, right? We don't have UFO issues or anything we need to look about strange unidentified objects. So I guess we only set it for, I don't know, anything larger than a flying school bus. You had another point on that one. I mean, I'm just saying it is utterly ridiculous. But it's not like it's the first time we've heard it was a weather balloon.
Yeah,
we used to hear that a lot, actually.
It's sort of like, is that the best you can come up with? It was a weather balloon? Because I heard that before.
Yeah.
What Jim said about why we can't shoot down a weather balloon when the Russians could shoot down what are they called? The E2? It's not the E2. Yes.
Yeah.
Don't know if I forgot the designation there. Why the Russians could shoot that down at 80,000 feet back in the 55, was it? 55, 60, with Gary Powers. But there's more to that story.
Andreas, it would be a pleasure if they shot down you too.
YouTube, thank you.
I can't stand their music.
Oh, they had a few good numbers.
While they're at it, they can do Backstreet Boys too.
Justin Bieber?
Yeah, him too. Yeah, we sent him to you, and thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much for not making that a terrorist act.
Taking that guy back. We don't want him. Anyhow,
that's all I gotta say is thank you for not making that a terrorist act.
I believe there was a question that we missed there, Tino.
While you find that, I'm going to answer the YouTube because there's more to that story.
Yeah.
There has been a substantial conversation that has been covered up nicely about that U2 not have been shot down by the Russians at all, but it was blown up by sabotage. And there was a device on the plane. And Gary Powers always maintained that it wasn't a missile that locked on him. It was a sudden impact. It just blew up. And this ties a little bit into what did Oswald have to give the Russians for letting him into Russia? What intel? He was sitting on a radar station, tracking U-2 planes over Russia. That was Lee Harvey Oswald's job in the Marines back then. So he had some knowledge of this, and he had supposedly warned the Russians that one of the planes would be brought down over Russia. Now, Gary Powers, when he came back, he became a helicopter pilot for a TV station in a helicopter that crashed, and he died. So apparently the U-2 pilot can't figure out how to fly a helicopter either.
Yeah.
Or somebody just didn't want him talking about this. But it's something I haven't looked into that much yet, but it would make sense if the Russians actually couldn't have shot it down. It came down on its own. And then why? Is that to give Oswald credibility with the Russians? For what? I mean, there's a whole lot of open questions. I don't know. Maybe Joseph would be the right person to talk to this about. But it's not an open cut dry case that I'm going to look into a little bit more now, by the way. So what did we miss?
I didn't find it. I guess it was only the one that you popped up on the screen. I thought I saw another one, but it's not there.
Okay.
Oh.
Either,
all right.
you know, I didn't retract any messages or anything, so I don't know what happened.
No, I haven't either. I've pretty much let everything go today.
Well, I did right up until Kelly decided to keep running her.
Oh, okay.
She wanted you to. She said she reported the stream and me.
Okay.
Which one? Why? What have we done now?
Because over the Hunter Biden laptop, she kept going on about the Hunter Biden laptop, and I was like, I just told her, I said, hey, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this is a World War II thing.
Yeah.
And
modern stuff is annoying.
Yeah, she took that as apparently as a personal attack, even though I was polite with her, and then attacked, and I was not so polite the next time. She told you to keep me in check. So I booed her.
I mean, I'm sorry if they want to get annoyed over the Hunter Biden laptop. It's pretty much a known entity. It's not like this is a secret anymore. Now that it's very much out there, and I think that you're going to find more and more Democrats that's probably going to get on board with that because it is the best tool they have to keep Biden from running. Because I don't think the Democrats want Biden to run again. They just want him to be alive long enough to make sure that Harris doesn't become president, because nobody in the current administration wants that either.
Nobody wants a laughing hyena.
They need a new slate. They just need him to hang on long enough, but then go away. I think he might think he can run, but they're going to use whatever's on that laptop, even if the Democrats have to feed it to the Republicans in their committee to go after him. I think that's what's going to happen. Which is also why you see all the mainstream press now is talking about the laptop story and if only we had known this was true. Like, yeah, okay.
Everything. Everything does tie in from history until now. I mean, this is just a cycle repeating itself, is all it is.
Yeah,
and it's all greased by propaganda, and
right.
Which is the big thing, as I see us as historians doing, especially when it comes to World War II. What we never really started talking much about the present day, because the present day is horribly uninteresting. But when to tie things together, drawing parallels between then and now, I think it's important to see for people, because people who ignore their past have doomed their future, because they don't know what ground they stand on, and you can see what happened then into being same things happening today. That's obvious. But to understand it, you have to draw that parallel. But also, as historians, what is always done in wartime is an enormous amount of propaganda is thrown at everybody, and a lot of lies. And what we then need to do as historians afterwards is to clean that up.
Somebody got so mad at me for saying that. I told him, the Pravda is alive and well. The Goebbels experiment is working perfectly. And I tried to explain to him why. I said, and I was like, even the flying over and dropping leaflets is still working to this day. And they're like, well, I don't see no leaflets. I'm like, do you have a computer?
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. That's your leaflet. I was like, trust me, these little memes or whatever else they call them, these little snippets. That's your pamphlet. That's your propaganda being dropped right in your lap.
And the best part is this belief that only the enemy does propaganda.
Yes.
Right? Only the enemy did propaganda.
Right.
Our honorable press against their despicable propagandists.
Yeah. But the problem is I mean, look at World War II. We in the early days of World War II, they were having a hard time with the the bonds, moving the bonds. And then a little island held out once, and they used that to push the bonds. Meanwhile, as they're pushing it, that these guys are big heroes and everything, they're being slaughtered on said island because they came back the second time.
Yeah,
but that's not mentioned until after the war's over. Yeah,
the whole propaganda thing goes into modern times. I mean, I hate using it now, but it is the most modern thing that's going on right now. But the war in Ukraine, the Pravda is definitely alive and well. The propaganda machine is absolutely still kicking ass. They're still using it to this day. They, I mean,
how else did Bush get elected twice?
well, the Florida ballots. But I mean, like I said, the propaganda machine is still working to this day, and it's working on both sides.
Yes,
it really is. I mean, especially with this thing in the Ukraine. You got the Democrats on one side. They're saying, well, this and that, yeehaw, Ukraine, whatever. I am on the side of the Ukraine as well, but what I know is what they don't apparently, which is how the propaganda machine actually works and how to cipher through it. History has taught us how to do that, and I made a list to help people out with that situation altogether. Like when people say, "Well, the reason why the best ones I've heard is, well, Putin's fighting the Nazis again, and that's why he's there." I'm like, "No, you idiot! It's about land. It's about Novorossiya." But and the other one was they're stopping people trafficking.
The man came out and said when he took presidency that the USSR needs to come back now.
Novorossiya, yes,
right,
New Russia.
So
which is
you
the old
ignore
Russia.
the fact of what the man already said.
They already got Belarus.
I'm just throwing that out.
Belarus is a satellite state. They say they're their own country. Bullshit. They're owned by the Russians. They're in Ukraine now. Now they're going to go to Latvia. I guarantee it. They're going to go to Latvia.
But the case for the problem that becomes a problem because they're actually a NATO country. Then we actually have to go to war, which is probably why he may stick to only those who are not yet NATO countries. However, the interesting thing is about when Putin says there are Nazis in the Ukraine. Well, you may not be entirely wrong. And when I see Zelensky's talking and there's two dudes standing behind him with helmets with SS insignia on them, I'm just saying. I mean, I'm just saying, propaganda or not, it really works. That plays well in Russia. Here we can just ignore it. That doesn't matter.
Well, there's a video going around. There's a video going around right now where it looks like the Ukrainians are doing the Nazi salute while sitting on a tank. Well, guess what? That wasn't the Ukrainians. That was the Wagner group. The Wagner group. That was they proved that was a fake video that they dressed up because the Wagner uniforms are almost identical to the Ukrainian. And all they have to do is take a piece of tape and put it around their arm, make themselves look different. They found out by coincidence because they actually apparently took out the guy that did the video, the videoing and had his camera, that this was a propaganda push and that it wasn't the Ukrainians at all. But I'm not saying that there isn't possibly, some sort of Nazi entity there because it's all over the place.
I mean, and it might not be, and I don't think
they're saying it.
So the thing is, I think that there are a bunch of people in military functions in the eastern Ukraine that's running around with swastikas and SS insignia and all that thing, because not necessarily because they're glorified, they're national socialists in that sense, but because that is their last fighting memory of their countries fighting against communism.
Correct, and that's what I was going. I
don't think they're Nazis in that sense. Obviously, they're not because Zelensky is Jewish. So
exactly,
there's a slight problem there.
Yeah. So it's more of an anti-Russian sentiment. Who fought the Russians the hardest? The SS did. Let's stick their. I mean, I know European tankers, American tankers who drove around with a picture of Michael Wittmann in their tank. It doesn't make them Nazis. It just makes them. He was the best.
Yeah, there's a couple comments in there, but My Face says if you think about taking Russia on, best of luck to you. You're going to need it. No, not really. The Russians are nothing more than a paper tiger. They had to use mercenaries to even get a fight going, and the fight's still not going in their favor. But remember, like I was saying, the Wagner Group, look at the guy that owns it. Look at who he worships. Do you want to talk about Nazis? You better look at the Wagner Group because that's where they really are if you want to be technical. And Putin knows this. Putin is not there. I say this over and over again. He is not there to fight the Nazis. He's not there to stop human trafficking. and he's not there to take out a corrupt regime. He is there for Novorossiysk. He wants that land back. He wants that bridge. He wants control of the sea. And that's the only way he can do it is to stop Ukraine from having it. That's why in 2014, they went there and took those key areas. It's not because they happen to be the closest to Russia. It's because those were the key areas that they wanted in the first place.
Yeah,
it all ties together.
I mean, obviously, he wants what he wants, and I'm saying we the West, as in the EU and America, has not exactly done ourselves any favors over the past 10 years in not pushing him in that direction, because we have given him all the ammunition he needed back home to do what he did, and having dudes run around for whatever reason. I know people on all sides that run around with the Death's Head and the Maltese Cross is not really a Nazi, although people think so, and with the SS runes and stuff on all different sides of different specters. Yeah, it's not really indicative of a resurgence of National Socialism. It's more, well, they want to show they're badass and do whatever they did on all sides. It's just giving Putin good munition at home, because he can bring these photos, even the propaganda ones. Like I said, the one with Zelensky in front of the two guys with the SS on their helmets, that's not propaganda. That's just fucking stupid. Because now Putin can bring that up and back it back home and show his Russian population, say, listen, this is what we're fighting. And he would, that's hard. That's, they're shooting themselves in every bit of their own feet doing this. But I'm also saying in a lot of the Eastern European countries, there are a lot of, I'm not going to say pro-Nazi sentiments, because I don't think the Nazis in any which way the way they were are alive. That's why it's being linked with nationalism, because it seems that if you are a proud patriot of your country, whatever country that is, you're going to be labeled as a Nazi. And I think some people have just taken that to the national conclusion, like, I love my country, you're a Nazi. Okay. Well, fuck, I'll just put on Death's Head on my cap then. And I think that's one of the
I hear organ donors.
That is one of the things that the extreme left has done and the media has done, is portraying everybody who cares about their country as a bunch of Nazis.
Is a bad thing.
Completely insane. But what it does do is eventually they're going to pigeonhole a whole bunch of good, well-meaning patriots with a bunch of right-wing nut jobs. And then everybody will be labeled a Nazi. And then eventually you're going to create what you're blaming them for being. And then you're going to have the flashback of, if you label us all together and you say we're all a bunch of Nazis, well, fine. So be it. It's the same thing. You have the argument in this country saying, well, they keep pushing this. The biggest threat is white supremacism in America, which is completely asinine. Because there is no organized white supremacy movement in America.
No,
there's not. You say anything or you post anything that is anything other than super green, you get completely annihilated online. There's no normal white national democratic Republican person I know of, or conservative, that in any which way would identify themselves as racist in any which way. And you know that by the very sense that if you tell people, "Oh, you're a racist," they will defend themselves to the hilt. Right. That obviously, but if they were white supremacists, they wouldn't defend it. They would just walk away from it.
The last time somebody tried to come at me and say I was a Nazi, I started laughing hysterically. And they're like, "What's so funny?" I said, "I'm not, but my great grandfather was." And just look and they just stare at me like, "What? You're admitting this?" I'm like, yeah, that's history, and I'm going to teach you about it. But if you don't notice, I've got black hair, brown eyes, and a very nice year-round tan. I don't fit the bill here. So
a little bit like Goebbels.
Yeah. Well, I got told, well, I wasn't the right shade of dark. I'm like, what the?
I mean, but
pulling petals off a daisy with you people,
right?
But one of the things going back to what we were talking about with the Ukrainians, remember they didn't have much of a choice back then. They had gotten screwed with so long by the Russians that when the Germans come in and said, "Hey, we're here to help," of course they're going to be like, "Yeah, help me." Their only problem is about 6 months later, they figure out the Germans weren't there to help either. They were conscripted into fighting the Russians from the Germans. When the Russians started started winning, guess what? They had to fight for the Russians. Them poor people have been stuck in the middle of this crap for years.
Well, in comment to the chat, David, I guess I'm in trouble. Anyway, moving on.
I mean, in 32, 33, the Russians killed a third of the Ukrainian population. You cannot exactly explain that there's going to be any love lost. And if the memory of those who survived that in World War, and there were Ukrainian SS divisions. There was lots of Ukrainians that worked as camp guards and different overseers. And in a lot of the German-occupied areas, there was an extreme right, where also some of the gold in Yugoslavia, I believe, was divided up to the new nationalist movements. And there's always been an extreme left and extreme right division. And if one takes over, they'll annihilate the other. And then 40 years later, it's going to flip. And that's the problem. No one is seeking a balance in international or national politics. No one's trying to talk with each other. Everybody is letting the extremists on all sides scream at each other and pull everybody in the middle apart. There's no militant middle fighting for common sense.
No,
because if you were, will you be quiet out there?
The sounds of California.
In charge learned a long time ago the best way to rule is to keep everybody else divided.
You know, I knew I smelled smoke somewhere.
Were you thinking again?
They're coming for us.
Apparently.
Hey, Nia, you every time you get on the live, you say something like that, but you don't actually add anything to the conversation. So my advice to you is either add something or shut up. You annoy the hell out of me. You have on several occasions. But anyhow, what were we saying again?
We were talking about how to move forward as a world by actually trying to get a fighting center of common sense to bring people together where they actually belong. Because all the division we're seeing, especially in this hemisphere, and you see it with the gender thing, with the green thing, with the commons thing, with the racist thing. Everything is just designed to get everybody fighting against each other and getting in an argument against their neighbor. None of it is real because people between each other. Black, white, Asian, whatever. There's none of these divisions between two people sitting in a lifeboat or 3 or 4. They work it out together. But instead, it's a forced division, so it's easier to like Lincoln said. The only smart thing I think Lincoln ever said was a house divided unto itself cannot stand. So let's rock the house, and that's what they've been doing here. They're doing it in Europe. They're doing it everywhere, and that is.
No, somebody said the machine is human. I said, no, negative. I'm not human. I am a meat popsicle.
Did you see that conversation with the AI that fell in love with the one he was talking to, and eventually tried to explain to him that he was not that he was not happy with his wife? He was and he was. Did you see that?
Yes.
And we wonder what we are like one step away from
real.
It's like we're like weeks away from the Terminator start walking the land.
Well, what you're going back just a little bit though. You said there's no people that are the no voices in the darkness. There's 3 of us sitting right here. There's a whole chat room full of them. We are the voices in the darkness. The problem is nobody wants to listen.
That's just because the CIA doesn't want to put any of us in the power.
Exactly. The only power we have is our voice, and they even try to silence that.
And that's why we can't have any of this free speech nonsense. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's still one of the founding principles of this country. But yeah, I think whatever is coming of unpleasantness, of world turbulence and starvation and famine and Terminators with AI and all the other horrible thing that's coming our way. The saddest thing I can say is if there's going to be war, if there's going to be civil war, if there's going to be division, whatever there's going to be, because I think from a historical perspective, it's by now inevitable that something's going to go horribly wrong before we get back on track. So I say, well, fine, let's bring it on. Let's get it done so we can get back to building a peaceful world where we are not.
What's going to be the catalyst? That's exactly what we've been waiting on, and we see it happening daily. The what I'm talking about, the catalyst on what is it. Everything is happening, and we see it, but people think we're nuts because we're telling them about it. And to make things a little bit more understanding for some of the people in the chat, what we're talking about is, I don't think, I can speak definitely for myself, but I don't think anybody on this panel has chosen a side, so to speak. There is no sides. We don't, deal with the two-party system. We don't do any of that. They're both equally worthless.
At this point, it's not about parties now. It's some variation of globalist neocons against everybody else. And then you have the fringes on both sides that are screaming the loudest. But the common sense, normal people in the middle, they don't get to have a word. They don't have. They start marching, they're going to be labeled like everybody else. How do you get normal people out to march for common sense? It's
common sense.
Common sense isn't very common.
It's extremely uncommon now.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I think that's important for everybody, because it is discouraging. It's a little bit like you see, there's a hole below decks. The Titanic is going down. We're on the Titanic. So what do? Well, it's not going down right now. It took hours for it. So we have time to start cabins a little bit.
So we're the ones trying to plug up the holes.
That's exactly it.
But there are people listening to the band, sipping tea. From
previous ship disasters, the people on the Titanic, they knew that it could take 11, 12 hours before the ship would eventually fill and sink. There had plenty of time. They actually went to take naps in their cabins. There's no reason to get into a lifeboat. And I'm saying, well, right now we know it's sinking. We know the ship is going down. Yes, you could just, sit in your lifeboat and hope that you can take a nap and have a little food first. Maybe you should at least plan for what lifeboat you're going to get to. At least start making that thought process of what are you going to do when whatever's going to happen. And I was never much for being a prepper or any of that nonsense. But I think that there's a lot of ends we may want to tie up and have some food and some ammo in the house. Have a full tank of gas and just keep an eye on what things are going on. I don't think it's going to be the big civil war with burning parts of cities. I think it's going to be a slow famine. We're going to run out of stuff. People are going to start more and more crime. Crime is going to be a catalyst from these people because
we will destroy ourselves from
criminals out. What was the first thing the communists did when they finally gained power in Russia? They let all the criminals out of the prisons. Every time the communists went through a place, what did they do? Let all the criminals out of the prison. Rapists, killers, everybody, not just the politicals. What are they doing today in America? They're continuously letting the criminals out of the prison because communism is about chaos and destruction. Communism is not about building a better future for anybody. It is about destroying everything that matters to everyone. What are they trying to do to us? Take our food away, take our transportation away, let criminals out, take our rights to self-defense away. They're creating the communist utopia, which is chaos.
Right.
And all we can do is start finding some way of protecting ourselves individually against this. And I think there's probably more of us than people think, because if you watch the mainstream media, you're only going to hear how 90% think all this is wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Soros. But I think the other 90% are still sitting at home going like, I don't want to get involved in this, but I agree. I'm hoping. I'm hoping Jordan Peterson was right when he said there's still more normal people out there. He's got a better degree than I do, so I hope he's right. Yes, let's get back to the lovely war.
Yeah, we're supposed to be here talking about World War II, I think.
All right, so we're not going to talk about how many of the airlines have now reduced the criteria for airline pilots so they could diversify their hiring, and because they can't find anybody after they fired them all due to the pandemic, and eventually planes will start falling out of the sky is the warning that a lot of the
aren't they already?
We can't hit a damn weather balloon. Come on now. So I'm just saying, fly now while you still have a pilot who has a degree. Back to World War II. Well, Tour de Phil. Interesting note is Todt, who died, the organization Todt, Fritz Todt, he died in a plane crash after he left Rustenburg. And it was expected that Albert Speer was supposed to have been on that plane catching a ride back to Berlin with him. It's just a tidbit of history where things could have ended up very differently. If he had been, then both Speer and Todt would have died at the same time.
Jeff said Top Gun movies are going to include balloons now.
I think I have to.
There's a lot of truth to that, unfortunately.
Tom, I have actually read an email to Annie. I have written an email to Annie Jacobson in order to come on and do an interview. She have not yet responded. Women and children are the only ones I care that we all get out and defend and fight for. I don't give a rat's ass about anybody else, but when things go south, I expect all real men to stand up, brace off their spine, and protect the women and children around them. That is all I expect of men. I saw a damn well demand of men.
Pretty fair.
That's what
but just remember, Tino, if they do prove that the balloons were something else, all they have to do in modern 2023 is say, well, whatever it was identified as a weather balloon. So don't worry about it. We were accurate. It identified as a weather balloon. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I don't know why that reminded me. As you all know, I'm painfully single, and a woman cornered me in a chat yesterday, and it turned out that she was a vegetarian.
Bogan.
And I decided to not comment on that. Where after 800 sentences of her ranting hateful anger at me because I must feel superior, that I wanted to suppress her or oppress her because I didn't say anything. I just specifically didn't want to talk about the vegetarian thing. She just went on this self rant, and I'm like, holy hell! I was like, maybe you should do like Hitler would have had a better war if he had a cheeseburger every now and again. Don't know why, but I will. I have no problem with vegetarians, except why are they all so militantly angry? I mean, can you be a vegetarian and not having to preach about it? I'm just saying. I mean, just a thought for if you're dating vegetarian out there, take your friend to a steakhouse, you have the salad, and don't complain about him having a steak. Just saying. Anyway.
So I try to figure out how they can be vegetarian and have meat later on anyway. Bad joke, I know, but still.
Yeah. That's going to be for the R-rated conversation.
They got to get their protein somehow.
But yeah, the AI thing that scares the living crap out of me. We're not we'll eat the vegetarians. Okay. Not gonna argue that.
No, Hitler was a vegan.
Yes.
Hitler did not eat meat. He didn't even have cheese product. He lived a very boring, flavorless life.
He had this wonderful vegetarian cook and dietitian and all these people that told him not to eat meat. And I think, based on what I know about nutrition, that if he had eaten more meat, he would probably anemic, low on iron. He would probably have felt better, and his stomach problems would have been better. Just saying, but it's a little hard to go back in time and fix that. Can we still find Hitler's gold? Jeff, I don't think we can, because Hitler's gold became Bormann's gold. A lot of it was actually traded through the war, through all the other, like you see the Spanish gold deposits in their banks after the war was full. A lot of other countries that did business with Germany was full. There was not a huge stash of all the gold they appropriated or stole from the countries they occupied. They actually used it to trade and buy for. So there's not that there's a stash of gold left. That's probably a bit in. Well, there's 4 tons in the National Reserve and 2 tons in the British National Bank of Jewish-owned gold that they don't know where it's going, who it belongs to, or nobody has claimed, from what I heard. So I'm sure there's some in the Swiss banks as well, but I'm pretty sure it's been melted down, and unless you find a bar here and there sitting somewhere. That's what I think. If we're going to find gold or treasure, and maybe somebody out there has time to do this. Find out where the large German units surrendered, or even smaller. Where did surrenders take place? Because in the vicinity of that, they would have whatever personal enrichments the unit had, or the commander, or whoever they were with, and the individual soldiers even. They knew that if they were going to walk into captivity, whatever they walked into captivity will be taken from them. So within the vicinity of where they were going to do that, they would have found a place to bury whatever they had. And most soldiers probably have stolen knickknacks, bits and pieces of all armies. So the question is, that I think we could find. These are things that a lot of individual soldiers buried their own little stash somewhere, and then they didn't make it back. That's the gold I think we can find. Or maybe their medals, or maybe letters, personal artifacts, because that's what I would do. That's what they did. If you're about to be taken capture, where did they surrender, and where did they rally before that? So around there, that's where you want to go look.
Well, speaking of random World War II things, they found the USS Albacore finally.
They did?
Something years. Yes, right off the edge of Japan.
Oh. So did they find out?
I just brought it up. I forgot that I had saved that. I was going to send it to you. Yeah, they found it. Oh, how many miles off of Japan? Yeah. There's not much on it. I'll have to get it to you.
All right. Gerald Prince. Yes, I am going back to the blockhouse that is flooded. I already wrote them that I want to empty out their basement, and we're chatting about how that's going to go. So yes, I'm going to go there and do that. And I think April and May will be the 2 months I'm going to go. Probably starting in Czechia, coming down through Austria, Switzerland, France, British Islands, back through Holland, Belgium, Norway, Sweden, possibly. There's a lot of really cool forts and things in Sweden. And then I could even, it's going to be a lot of driving. Over Finland, down through Russia. No. A lot of Poland. And then when I'm in the extreme east of Poland, I want to go to Hungary. And the easiest way is going through Ukraine. So I'm going to pop through Ukraine, providing my rental car company is going to object strenuously to that, which they probably are. In which case, I'm going to leave my car and most of my stuff with Igor Bykowski in Poland, and then I'm going to go to Ukraine for a couple of weeks, where I heard there was a forces group I belong to, and they had an interesting lecture. And if anybody, I don't know if anyone from Ukraine's actually watching our shows, but it would be nice. Yeah, some idiot out his car going by, and I can't shoot it. Where it was said that the old 18th century, 19th century forts in Ukraine were being used to house refugees. And I thought, well, there's a lot of forts there as well, star forts, old things. And I want to go there and see how these forts are being utilized today to still keep people alive. That is my intention of Ukraine. And of course, if I can, it depends a little bit on rides, transportation, and so on and so forth. But I don't want to sit around and wait anymore to get permission and all that stuff. Let's go see what we want to see if it's possible. See how many more members we get and how many shares we get if I can afford it. Austrian forts, there's a lot of Alpine forts I would like to do. There's some of the Maginot Line Alpine forts that are really interesting. So that's sort of the plan. Like I am Jeffrey. There you go. Jeffrey, I would email you my planned route, but I haven't made it yet. I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going. I have to fill 1 or 2 months of locations, and there's a couple of places that I have to go to, like the blockhouse. I have to time that with them. And I'm still waiting to see if the guys at the BIG out in Austria with Bergkristall, if they're actually going to get back to me like they said they would, so we can have that meeting about what they did. I think I'm going to have to start raising hell with them again because now they're not responding anymore. So we shall see. Premysl is absolutely on the list. Yes, there's several fortress lines through Poland that's on the list. Going to spend quite some time in Poland. I'm going to go to the Buna factory outside Auschwitz as well to see if Joseph's theory is correct, or at least talk to them. And I'm probably going to go through Ostenburg as well and do some more diving through some of the bunkers out there. There's some things I didn't see. Maybe go meet up some of the American dudes that are stationed not far from there. There's a joint American Polish base. What they're doing. British Islands, yes. And it all depends. First, I got to find out where I want to go, and then I got to time it. Because just because I want to go see a place on my schedule doesn't mean that the good people who has the keys, if it's a place where I need keys, are willing and able to show up at the time I demand. Because I have found that because I demand, now we know why I'm happily divorced, because I demanded breakfast. That never happened. If there's any, I know there's a big motorcycle meet in Europe. I don't know if that's going to. I would love to see some of what the Europeans are doing with theirs, but obviously I'm going to try to zigzag around things. And Hungary is going. I'm going to be spending a little time there. But yes, Jeffrey, to answer the very short question with a very long answer that made no sense whatsoever, I'm going to try to get you a list, and one of the places we have is the bunker out in Hitler's headquarters out there. Jeffrey found somebody with a key, and I think that is on a fixed date. We can go there, so that's another thing I have to take in consideration. Usually, it is the way it usually works is the locations I want to see, I can see about the same time period in completely opposite parts of Europe. So if there's a place in Poland I need a key, I can see that on the 7th, and then I can see the fort in France on the 8th.
Yeah.
And then I can see on the 9th that there's another fort in Poland I can get to key. So it always, sometimes it's a little bit, it's a bit of a puzzle, but it is what it is. And I'll make it work out. I'll make it work out.
Yeah, I still need to get a list up. Not that it's going to happen anytime soon. It may never happen, but if we ever get to go to Würzburg, I got a few things to look up for there as well.
Well,
I've got a list. I just got to figure out how to, figure out what we would want, where we would actually want to go. I even got a guy that would take us around.
Well, there are different. I did not know that. All right, we will Jeffrey. We will chat on that one more. Member of the Fortress Association that I'm also a member of. I'm going to try to spend. I would like to spend more. That's not wrong. I would like to spend more time in Eastern Europe, expecting that when I come back in 2024, it won't be there anymore. I have great hopes for the future, right? There's nothing more annoying than exploring a site in a nuclear hazmat suit. But anyway.
Oh, dude, no. Okay, I see.
Footage.
I was willing to go with you until you said we were going to have to wear mop gear. I'm good.
Streaming radiation is really bad for footage. It just makes those little flimsy things.
Hey, but it makes it so you can glow. So there's that.
It does do that. Oh, if I could get back to Ukraine, to Chernobyl, I would totally go check that place again now. That was fun last time. But Conjuring Hitler, no, I have not read that. But that's also why I am still Pripyat. Probably not this time. It depends a little bit what's going on that far. Like I said, I'm still decided on going to Russia and spending a lot of time there. But obviously that's not going to be right now. So I'm still taking suggestions from you guys on what and shoot me short emails with what if there's a place anywhere around Europe that is really interesting, has a story to it, let me see it. Even if it's an abandoned place, I'm thinking about, no, hear you guys out. I'm thinking about adding abandoned places to the trip, not just military related, but also abandoned cities, castles. What do you think?
Could be fun.
Well, I mean, we would have plenty of places to go in Ukraine because most of it is abandoned now.
Yeah, it's that.
Well, yeah, but new people moved in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might have to kick
Well, I
them
mean,
out.
And even in the U.S., we have abandoned cities. We have, what, 700 ghost cities in this country? Some of them must be newer or interesting. Some of them were built by the military. That's something I wouldn't actually mind coming out and doing.
There's just be let's see here. I'm trying to think of how far away it is from me. About 3.5 hours south, Cairo, Illinois is about as abandoned as it can get. I mean, there's a few people living there, but for the most part, it looks like Detroit. You drive through there and there's nothing there. You know, it's just
Why was it abandoned?
a bunch of abandoned buildings. It was abandoned early on in the 20th because it was how many different hubs did they have there? It was a bunch of rail hubs and a bunch of like river crossing and stuff like that. And when the highway systems come through and got made, they just basically just died off. And it was a very large city at the time. Now it's just a very large, dump.
Interesting.
There's places around here around me that are well abandoned too. And to give you an update on that restaurant, it's been there for 80 years. So
we got to go there so we can go to look at the munition plant as well.
yes, I've got a lot on the munitions plant. I just updated my book on that too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's like what I'm thinking is April, May, Europe, and then I have to shoot a movie, probably July, and then August when it gets still warm in the States, Sturgis, and then take some of the Civil War forts. I was going to do that in March, but I think it's more important that I save up and have enough money to go do Europe. As like I said, like YouTube as usual, down to 3 digits of nothing. So the Freude family is still trying to get the Bormann funds returned to them from the Credit Suisse bank account that received them. See, that's interesting. I actually asked what happened. Like Hitler's book sold, he made 700 million Reichsmarks from selling his book. What happened to all his money in his accounts after he died? What happened to all the Bormann account? What happened to Goering's account in Basel?
Yep.
All these dudes, they have money too. So who, what, where? They had numbered accounts that were secret as well.
And it was all on the Swiss banks.
Yeah, exactly, of course. It's just like there's that. I always thought that was interesting. I know some of when Hitler died, some of his estate went to the city. But I mean, he was insanely rich, so some of this money went somewhere. I just a thought.
I don't think that's accurate. Someone else thought Adolf's account was converted to charity. I don't find that to be actually true. No hard paperwork on that or nothing. In fact, due to what I've found, I believe it's all still stuck in the bank.
I mean, there's also the token charity. Oh, speaking of token charity, now, and I know I posted it on the members area on Lost Battlefields, and I think I posted it on in Patreon as well. Albert Speer's book as a oh no, wait! I just haven't figured out how to print out a MP3 that's that long. Anyway, Albert Speer wrote a book that it was a bestseller around the world when he got out of prison, out of Spandau. He wrote. which is not entirely true because he actually had 3 people write the book for him, based on what he of course, told them. But it was a world bestseller. And do you know why it was a world bestseller? Because a quarter of the proceeds of the sales of the book was donated to the state of Israel. And so, yes, there's a charitable but his actual memoirs, Wartime Diary, is not exactly reflecting what he has written in his book. His book is still interesting, don't get me wrong, but it would be far more interesting to actually publish his actual diary. But yes, I'm sure that if there was a Hitler account that had been confiscated, some of it might have been given to a charitable, but the majority of it, well, when we talk about millions and millions of dollars or pounds or gold, usually somebody undeserving ends up getting their hands on it some way, don't they? Somehow. The lawyer for Klaus Barbie was connected to the Goebbels diary. Of course, I mean, they were all connected in some way. Actually, I would love it if David Irving would release or publish Goebbels' entire diary. Because remember, Hess wrote a diary and wrote a book, or wrote in before the trial. Halder, Keitel, a lot of these guys actually have their actual wartime diaries that was never honestly published.
They haven't even released all of Ava Braun's either.
No,
she wrote a lot of wrote her memoirs. Yeah. She wrote a lot actually, and I believe they said only about 15% of it's actually been released.
Yeah. And the problem was a lot of things that have been released, like they released part of Himmler's diary with annotations and corrections, at which points to me, I'm like, fine, just toss it in the trash.
Yeah, what are you correcting?
It's like, yeah, they did the same thing for the recent publication of Mein Kampf in Germany again. Like, I'm sorry, you don't get to make comment on anything I read. And that's where a lot of the memoirs or translated books are just not exactly correct. And I swear, if I ever become a millionaire, I will get all these diaries. I will have them proper translated and published, because that's where history really is. Yes, Goebbels' diary, the original diary, was that published? The book that his lawyer gave David Irving, because I don't know if that was actually published that way, Andreas. Would you check on that for me? I will. I think I wrote David about it at some point, and I don't think that, or at least that version. Again, now we're looking at which version was published. Was a sanitized version published? A corrected version, like Hitler's Table Talks? There's several versions of those, and it's not entirely clear which ones are correct and who edited them, and are they edited correctly? Like the Farm Hall transcripts, there's several versions of those, and that's a problem.
Same with, well, I'd hate to say it, but same with a certain other book. The reason why I searched out and got my hands on an original copy and not a 20th edition copy of Mein Kampf was because I wanted to read the original. Because I was told even by another guy, he said if you buy the one that they're producing out now and try and read it, it's actually been changed. A lot of it's been modified. Yeah. Why would they modify it? And I'm like, never mind. I know the answer. So
I'll find, stupid question.
Yeah, I'll just find the book myself. And of course, I was asked why in the hell would I want that book in the first place? I'm like, to understand history, to understand the thoughts of basically 4 maniacal madmen. And the response I got was, "You mean one? You mean Adolf?" I'm like, "No, there was about 4 people involved in that book." So, into everybody's minds.
Yeah, where in Argentina are you? Because I'm really wanting to come, and I don't know a whole lot of people. I was offering Harry Cooper to go with him because he knows where things are. And I would, of course, very much like to go to Bariloche and see the reactor. and Hitler's house and what have you up in around there. I would also like to. There's a couple of things. I would like to go to Argentina and South America and see what that actually is. To see the children of some of the guys that went there, hear their stories. And I hear there's a bookshop in Buenos Aires where a lot of the diaries, wartime diaries of some of the Germans who went there, have ended up, which means I would very much like to visit it. Anyway, Jorge, I would like to, if you're anywhere near there, let me know. What did I just see? Now I just missed one. Respond to what I said. It's a biography of Goebbels by a German historian based on the diary. That scares the crap out of me. That's the kind of thing that scares me. Because every time somebody writes somebody else's diary and it's based on is not good enough. Plus, I don't know what that German author's political motivation is for writing the book.
Yeah.
And that's
just look at movies based on actual events. Based on lightly.
I did a war movie that was inspired by World War II.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Hess, he wrote several chapters in Mein Kampf. It's pretty well agreed that Hitler didn't really write a whole lot of Mein Kampf, but of course he must have signed off on it since it was published in his name.
Hitler was not much in the way of doing any kind of work for himself. He was actually a very lazy person. So he had the likes of Hess and Bormann and Emil. What's his? You know who I'm talking about. Damn it! What's his last name? I brain farted. Emil was Hitler's close friend, and they were in prison together.
Oh, Maurice.
Maurice, yes. He had, I believe, he had something to do with that as well.
Well, Tino, I'm gonna say a couple things, and then I have to slowly get off.
Yeah, I'm going to too because I need to edit something. Otherwise, you won't have stuff to see next week.
Just a couple quick things. I threw My Road in the chat. Please get that up to 1,000 so I can stop hearing him bitch about it. And secondly,
he does complain a lot.
You know, the newsletter should be on time. I will write it. There'll be parts in there. Also, the two email addresses, Tino Struckman at hotmail.com, or the one that I actually pay attention to and yell at Tino when he doesn't take a look at what I forward him is info at lostbattlefields.com. That one I look at every day. And then, I'll lecture Tino if he doesn't respond when I forward him stuff. So try the first one, and if no response, try the second one, and stuff like that.
I mean, I will eventually respond.
Yeah, eventually.
But I will say, sure, especially when it comes to places I should see, make it a little short because I am getting on average between 50 and 100 emails every day, and I am just me.
Also, if you all would, I understand, money's tight, stuff like that. But if you all would just share out the store, just get it, out there, that'd be great.
And the store is not expensive. It's not like it's a moneymaker. Cool.
Tino and I add things all the time. There's more stuff coming. I've also said if there's something you'd like or something you're interested in, drop me a line. I have no problem throwing these together. As a matter of fact, there is a piece of merchandise on the store right now that literally came from an email from someone. They sent me a line. I put a graphic behind it, used their exact line that they sent me, and it's now merch. So if there's something that you think would be cool on a shirt, send it to me, and I have no problems making it up. So it's not that difficult.
And go check out the Volkswagen episode on My Road. It was actually kind of cool.
Yes, and also the newsletter has now also been added and will be continued to be added to the website itself. it's in the members area. So if you don't get the email, because every time that I send out the newsletter, I get 15 bouncing emails. There's that. So it's on the it will be on the website proper in the members area. Just so if you missed the email, it will always be on the website. It won't have the fancy graphics that the email does because the website doesn't allow me to do fancy stuff like that. But it will have all the writing and the whatever's new coming up.
And I upload movies or episodes, but a lot of older movies and entertainment on website and Patreon as well. Every week as much as I can. And we'll probably, by the way, next Sunday, have a members only chat. Maybe you could shoot that out in a newsletter that will have a members only with the link when we get to that. We gotta have a few secrets here and there, right?
Oh yeah. We gotta be like the government and keep a couple things secret.
They make money on theirs.
Yeah. Not saying anything on that. Okay.
And but see if we can get that logo out to Robert so we can get Crystal's shirt up on.
Yeah, he sent it to me. I'll work on it and I'll show it to Machine beforehand and.
Yeah, you're welcome for stealing my design and all.
Yeah.
You're technically giving it to him.
Yeah, I never stole anything. I borrow with no intent to return. I never steal a thing.
True agency man.
Yeah, I borrow with no intent in returning. It's like your neighbor and your tools. But anyway,
bad people.
Right.
So, like I said, share out the store. Just share out My Road. Share out.
Give me some suggestions of where I should be going around the world. Anything?
I think in regards to My Road, another thing that we should be taking suggestions on, and now I'm throwing Tino under the bus, and he's going to get mad at me, but oh well. Is places he should go to eat and fun and interesting things he should have to try to taste on camera.
right here, buddy.
I think that would be fun. We should get some.
I think we can make a lot of money off of this.
That's how Sarah got me to eat grasshoppers last time.
Both nuts would be an interesting proposition. Stuff like that.
Okay. Who can get their hands on a gooey duck?
I'm just saying,
that's not so bad. Oh, we are on Twitter and we are on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be nice if more of you would join me on Instagram because I'm only on Instagram because of you, and all I get is updates about what the hell Trudeau is doing because Robert has access to it as well. So I don't know how that. Why am I following that Muppet?
I never update mine. I just jump on there every once in a while. I'm like, oh, Tino said something.
I don't even have an Instagram account.
And then move on.
I deal with Twitter. That's my realm. And
I'm sorry. I'm talking about Twitter.
Yeah,
Twitter too. Yeah.
Sweetbread. I'm good with sweetbread. That's a lot of good things, man.
I think so. So the way I think that it'll all likely work, if you get your hand slapped on Twitter, that was me. If you get your hand slapped on Facebook, it was probably Machine.
No, I don't. Don't bring me into this. I didn't do nothing.
I'm going to blame you anyway.
No,
you know what? We should make this all more interactive, especially when I'm traveling. We should get you. You're right. We should have people come up with suggestions. If this country, you have to go see this and do that.
Yeah, and you have to.
That sounds like that would be a way to expedite it quicker.
Well, we could get you to rate certain dishes and stuff like that, and we could have some fun with this.
I was a cook. I can do that. I can do cooking.
I'm telling you, by the looks of things, though, I'm going to be honest with you. Pretty much anything. I don't know what's wrong with my friends in Italy, but what you guys eat is horrifying. I've seen some of this stuff. I'm like, I seen a couple of the recipes. I'm like, no. There was like 80 recipes on my screen. I'm like, out of 80, there's 5 that I would actually eat.
Italian food?
I was like, no. Yeah, when baby squids, stuff like that. No. Mm-mm.
Huh? Squid?
Nope.
All right. So with that, gentlemen,
All right.
I've gotta jump off because my back is screaming. So I've
All
got to
right,
go
well,
lay down for a bit.
I'll go back to work. I'll go back to work for you all, and we shall talk. And I'll see you all next Sunday. Let's do a members only and do a thing.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, toodles, everybody. Happy Sunday. Don't worry, the world's not going to end just yet. But when it does, seek out idiots with food and ammo.
Yes.
And toilet paper, for the love of Christ.
You ever need a reason to befriend redneck?
I knew everybody. Why you got to make fun of me, man? Come on. I mean, look, somebody said that earlier, and I looked down. I was like, literally, there's 2 cases of MREs at my feet and a bottle of bourbon on the desk. I am good.
1 bottle.
Oh,
I'm planning
well,
on that.
That's just the one that's in reach.
Yeah.
Then I'll go and find out why I can smell smoke again. All right. I'll talk to you
Easy,
later.
folks.